What happens when a woman who trusts no one saves a life that will change an entire kingdom? In the brutal frontier where survival meant steel and silence, Kaela Frost was about to discover that the greatest battles aren't fought alone. They're fought for those you choose to protect. This is the story of a warrior who thought strength meant isolation, until one bloody night forced her to choose between the emptiness she knew and the family she never believed she deserved. If you're ready to witness a tale of transformation, redemption, and the fierce power of choosing to stand with others, stay with me until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The forest had been dead for 3 days. Kaela Frost could smell it in the air, that peculiar combination of charred pine and scorched earth that clung to her throat like ash-coated fingers. The fire had swept through the valley with the kind of merciless speed that left no survivors, no second chances. Now, all that remained were blackened skeletal trees reaching toward a sky that had forgotten how to rain. She moved through the devastation like a shadow given form, her boots making barely a whisper against the carpet of gray powder that used to be undergrowth. Everything about Kaela spoke of controlled violence. The way her hand never strayed far from the twin blades at her hips, the constant scanning of her gray eyes, the tension in her shoulders that suggested she was always one heartbeat away from killing or running. At 32, Kaela had spent half her life in the frontier territories, those brutal stretches of wilderness where the old kingdoms ended and lawlessness began. Out here there were no courts, no guards, no one to enforce justice, but the blade in your hand and the speed of your reflexes. She'd learned that lesson young, learned it in blood and betrayal, and she'd carved it into her bones until trusting anyone felt like an invitation to die. The settlement she'd passed through 2 weeks ago, what was left of it, had reinforced that belief. Raiders had come in the night, killed everyone they couldn't use, and burned the rest. Kaela had arrived at dawn to find bodies in the street and smoke still rising from collapsed roofs. She'd walked through the carnage with the same expression she wore now, empty, distant, untouchable. She hadn't tried to bury them. The frontier didn't reward sentiment. Now, as twilight bled across the burned forest, Kaela was simply passing through. She had no destination, no purpose beyond putting distance between herself and whatever trouble might be brewing behind her. That was how she'd survived this long, never staying, never attaching, never giving the world a reason to remember her name. The scent hit her when the last sunlight was fading to bruised purple. Blood. Fresh blood. Kaela froze mid-step, every sense sharpening to a razor's edge. Her right hand dropped to the hilt of her longer blade while her left reached for the knife at her lower back. She closed her eyes, filtering out the smell of ash to focus on that copper tang riding the evening wind. North, maybe 200 yards, and beneath the blood, voices. Low, rough, celebrating. Kaela's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to turn away, to melt back into the burned forest and leave whatever was happening to sort itself out. This wasn't her problem. Getting involved meant risk, and risk meant potential complications she couldn't afford. But even as she thought it, her feet were moving north. She told herself it was just reconnaissance, just checking what kind of threat might be operating in this area. Information was currency in the frontier, and knowing who was hunting nearby could mean the difference between life and death later. The voices grew clearer as she approached, moving from tree to tree with the practiced silence of someone who'd spent years hunting both prey and predator. 5 distinct voices, all male, all speaking in the crude dialect of frontier mercenaries. The kind of men who hired their swords to whoever paid and asked no questions about the work. Waste of time. 3 weeks tracking through burned-out nothing for this? Boss said the white one specifically, worth triple if we bring it back alive. Thing's probably gonna die anyway. Look at it. Can't weigh more than 5 pounds. Laughter, harsh and dismissive. Kaela crept closer, using the twisted remains of a fallen oak for cover. Through the skeletal branches, she could finally see them. 5 men in mismatched armor and travel-stained cloaks formed a loose circle in a small clearing. Their horses were tied nearby, and a small fire crackled between makeshift bedrolls. They looked like standard mercenary trash, competent enough to be dangerous, but undisciplined enough to make mistakes. And in the center of their circle, backed against a charred stump, was a wolf cub. Kaela's breath caught. The cub couldn't have been more than 6 weeks old, all oversized paws and downy fur. But its coat, Its coat was pure white, luminous even in the dying light, like freshly fallen snow. It had its back pressed against the stump, tiny lips pulled back to show milk teeth that wouldn't intimidate a rabbit, and in its pale blue eyes was something that made Kaela's chest constrict. Defiance. Pure, desperate defiance. "Grab it quick," one of the mercenaries said, stepping forward with a burlap sack. "Boss wants it unharmed, but I'm not getting bit by the little bastard." "Just stun it," another suggested. "Crack on the head'll put it down gentle." The man with the sack grinned. "Good thinking." He reached for his belt, pulling out a weighted club. The cub snarled, a sound so small and futile it made Kaela's hands curl into fists. "Walk away," her mind whispered. "This isn't your fight. These men, this animal, none of it matters to you." But she was already moving. Kaela Frost had killed her first man at 16, and by now, the count had long since stopped mattering. What mattered was efficiency, precision, and the cold mathematics of violence. 5 targets, all focused inward. Poor positioning, no sentries. Amateur hour. She moved like smoke through the burned trees, circling to come at them from the side opposite their horses. Her longer blade, a 40-inch cavalry saber she'd taken off a dead officer years ago, slid from its sheath without a whisper of sound. The shorter blade, a vicious 18-inch fighting knife, filled her left hand. The mercenary with the club raised it above the cub. Kaela struck. She crossed the distance in 3 running steps and hit the first man before any of them knew she was there. Her saber took him in the gap between his shoulder pauldron and gorget, the blade punching through the side of his neck and severing his carotid in a spray of arterial blood. He was dead before his knees buckled. "Contact!" someone shouted, but the word barely left his lips before Kaela was already moving. The second mercenary fumbled for his sword. Kaela's boot caught him in the knee with a crack of shattering bone, and as he fell screaming, her knife opened his throat. 2 down in 4 seconds. The remaining 3 had their weapons out now, spreading into a defensive formation. These men had fought before. She could see it in the way they moved, the way they didn't panic. "Who the hell are you?" the tallest one demanded. He had a long sword and a scarred face that spoke of surviving battles he had no business walking away from. Kaela didn't answer. Talking was a waste of breath. She feinted at the man on her left, watched his shield come up, then pivoted hard right and crashed into the middle fighter. Her saber deflected his overhead swing while her knife punched up under his ribs, finding his heart with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly where to put a blade. He gasped, blood bubbling at his lips, and she was already pulling away before his body hit the ground. 3 dead, 2 left. "Rush her together!" Scarface shouted. They came at her from both sides, coordinated, weapons high. A pincer attack meant to overwhelm with numbers and force. It might have worked on a lesser fighter. Kaela dropped into a crouch and let their momentum carry them past her, then erupted upward with both blades spinning. Her saber caught the left-hand mercenary across the backs of his knees, hamstringing him, while her knife deflected Scarface's return swing. The hamstrung man collapsed, screaming. Kaela's boot found his head and silenced him permanently. Now it was just her and Scarface, circling each other in a clearing that stank of blood and voided bowels. The fire crackled. The horses whinnied nervously. The white wolf cub watched from its position against the stump, utterly still. "You made a mistake," Scarface said, breathing hard. "You know who hired us? You know what happens when you cross—" Kaela's saber took his sword hand off at the wrist. He stared at the stump, at the hand still gripping his longsword on the ground, his face going gray with shock. When he looked back up, Kaela was already sheathing her blades. "Tell whoever hired you," she said, her voice low and cold as winter stone, "that the white wolf is off limits. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what happens to anyone else who comes looking." She bent down, picked up his severed hand, and threw it at his feet. "Now run." Scarface ran, stumbling and sobbing, clutching his mutilated arm. Kaela watched until he disappeared into the burned trees, then turned her attention to the carnage around her. 4 bodies. She should search them, take anything valuable. Weapons, coin, supplies. The frontier didn't reward waste any more than it rewarded sentiment. But her eyes kept drifting to the wolf cub. It hadn't moved, still pressed against the stump, still showing those tiny teeth, still radiating that futile defiance. But something in its eyes had changed. The pure terror had given way to something else. Wariness, but also curiosity. Kaela approached slowly, hands away from her weapons. "Easy," she murmured, though she had no idea if the creature could understand tone. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub's lips twitched, the snarl faltering. Kaela knelt 5 feet away, lowering herself to seem less threatening. This close, she could see the cub was in bad shape. Its ribs showed through the white fur, and there were scratches along its flanks that looked like they'd come from rough handling. How long had these men been chasing it? "Where's your mother?" Kaela asked quietly. The cub just stared at her with those pale blue eyes. Kaela sat back on her heels, thinking. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to walk away. Whatever these mercenaries were hunting, whatever importance this white wolf held, it was exactly the kind of complication she'd spent 15 years avoiding. But as she thought it, the cub took a tentative step forward. Then another. Kaela held perfectly still, barely breathing. The cub crept across the blood-soaked ground, its nose working, tiny ears swiveling. When it was close enough to touch, it stopped and looked up at her. And then, with a trust that made something crack inside Kayla's chest, it pressed its small head against her palm. The contact sent a jolt through her entire body. The cub's fur was softer than anything she'd felt in years, warm and alive. And when it looked up at her again, there was no more wariness. Just acceptance. Kayla's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing back the moisture that had no business being in her eyes. "You're going to get me killed," she whispered. The cub's tail gave a tiny wag. Kaela exhaled slowly, then carefully gathered the creature into her arms. It was so light, so fragile, and when it curled against her chest with a soft whimper, she felt something inside her, something she'd buried so deep she thought it was dead, begin to wake. She stood, the cub cradled against her, and looked around the clearing. The bodies would draw scavengers by morning. The fire would burn out. The horses might wander or might stay. She didn't care. "We need to move," she told the cub. "Whoever hired these men will send more." The cub made a sound that might have been agreement. Kaela turned and walked into the burned forest, leaving the carnage behind. She had no plan, no destination, no idea what she was going to do with a white wolf cub that apparently had a price on its head. But for the first time in 15 years, she wasn't alone, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that terrified her more than any blade. They traveled through the night. Kaela kept to the burned sections of forest where tracking would be harder, moving in a zigzag pattern that would make following them nearly impossible. The cub stayed quiet in her arms, occasionally shifting but never struggling. When she finally stopped 3 hours later, it was in a shallow cave carved into a hillside by some long-ago flood. She set the cub down gently and checked their surroundings. The cave was maybe 10 feet deep, narrow enough to defend, with good sightlines to the approaches. It would do for a few hours of rest. The cub immediately stumbled to the back of the cave and collapsed in an exhausted heap. Kaela watched it for a moment, then shrugged out of her pack and pulled out a water skin and some dried meat. The meat was elk, tough and salty, but it was protein. She tore off a small piece and offered it to the cub. Pale blue eyes opened, focused on the meat, and the cub lunged with surprising speed. It tore into the offering with tiny, desperate bites that spoke of days without food. "Easy," Kaela murmured. "You'll make yourself sick." But she gave the cub 2 more pieces before tucking the rest away. Then she poured water into her cupped palm, and the cub lapped at it eagerly. When it had drunk its fill, the cub looked up at her and yawned, showing a pink tongue and those harmless milk teeth. Then it curled up against her leg and fell asleep almost instantly. Kaela stared down at the small white form, at the gentle rise and fall of its breathing, and something in her chest tightened painfully. She'd killed 4 men tonight, maimed a 5th. She'd left them in pieces in a burned forest because they'd threatened this creature, and she couldn't even fully explain why. The frontier had taught her that attachment was death, that caring about anything beyond your own survival was an invitation for the world to break you. She'd learned that lesson when she was 17, when the mercenary company she'd joined had been slaughtered by a rival band, and the man she'd trusted, the captain she'd thought might be different, had sold her out to save his own skin. She'd survived by cutting her way free, killing 3 men, and walking away from everything that didn't fit in a pack. And she'd sworn then that she'd never give anyone or anything that kind of power over her again. Yet here she was, sitting in a cave with a white wolf cub pressed against her leg, knowing that she'd just painted a target on her back for whoever wanted this animal badly enough to hire mercenaries. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the darkness. The cub slept on, oblivious. Kaela ran a hand over her face, then pulled out her whetstone and began sharpening her blades. The rhythmic scrape of steel on stone was familiar, calming. It gave her something to focus on besides the dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. When both blades were razor sharp, she cleaned them thoroughly, then checked her throwing knives, her garrote wire, her boot daggers. Everything had to be perfect. Ready. Because tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, someone else would come. And she needed to be ready to kill them too. The thought should have bothered her. 15 years ago, it would have. But the frontier had carved away everything soft, everything weak, until all that remained was the essential truth. Kill or be killed. Survive or die. Trust no one. Except now there was this tiny creature sleeping against her leg, trusting her completely, and Kaela couldn't remember the last time anything had trusted her. Hell, she couldn't remember the last time she'd let anything close enough to try. She worked through the night, taking watch in 2-hour shifts where she'd allow herself to rest, but never truly sleep. The cub didn't stir except to occasionally shift position, always maintaining contact with her leg, as if reassuring itself she was still there. When dawn came, gray and cold through the mouth of the cave, Kaela gently extracted herself from the sleeping cub and moved to check their surroundings. The burned forest looked even more desolate in daylight, an endless expanse of blackened waste under a pale sky. Behind her, she heard a tiny yawn. She turned to find the cub stretching, its front legs extended, rear end in the air, tail attempting a wag. When it saw her, it scrambled over on oversized paws and pressed against her boots. Despite everything, Kaela felt her lips twitch towards something that might have been a smile. "Hungry?" she asked. The cub's tail wagged harder. She fed it more dried meat and water, then packed up their meager camp. They couldn't stay here. Couldn't stay anywhere for long. She needed to put distance between them and that clearing, needed to find better territory where she could see threats coming. The cub followed her out of the cave, stumbling occasionally on the uneven ground, but keeping pace with a determination that was almost comical given its size. "You need a name," Kaela said as they walked. Talking to the animal felt strange, but the silence of the burned forest was oppressive, and hearing her own voice helped ground her. "Can't keep calling you cub." The wolf looked up at her, tongue lolling. Kaela considered. She'd never named anything before, had never had anything to name. What did you call a white wolf cub that apparently had a bounty on its head? "Orin," she said finally, remembering an old frontier legend about a white wolf that could see the future. "Your name is Orin." The cub, Orin, made a sound that might have been approval. They traveled south, leaving the burned forest behind and entering territory that was merely scorched rather than destroyed. Here, sparse grass pushed up through the ash, and occasional trees still showed green beneath the char, signs of life returning. Kaela kept them moving at a steady pace, always watching for pursuit, always ready. Orin trotted beside her, occasionally veering off to investigate interesting smells, but always returning when she called. 3 days passed in this fashion. They covered maybe 40 miles, staying off established trails, sleeping in whatever shelter presented itself. Kaela hunted when she could. A rabbit the second day, a young deer the third. She cooked the meat thoroughly and shared it with Orin, who ate with the enthusiasm of an animal finally getting regular meals. And slowly, something changed. Orin grew. Not just physically, though the regular food was already filling out those 2 prominent ribs, but in confidence, in strength, in the bond forming between them. The cub started to anticipate her movements, to read her body language. When she stopped, Orin stopped. When she crouched into a defensive posture, Orin pressed close to her leg. And Kaela found herself softening. It was subtle at first, a hand dropping to scratch behind Orin's ears when the cub did something particularly clever. A murmured word of praise when Orin successfully stalked a beetle. Small gestures that felt foreign, almost frightening in their tenderness. On the 4th night, camped in a dense thicket that provided good cover, Kaela sat with her back against a tree and Orin curled in her lap. The cub had grown enough that it was a tight fit, but neither of them seemed to mind. "This is stupid," Kaela whispered, running her fingers through white fur. I'm going to get you killed. Or you're going to get me killed. Either way, this ends badly. Oren looked up at her and licked her chin. Kaela's throat tightened. I don't know how to do this, she continued, the words spilling out into the darkness. I don't know how to care about something, about someone. Every time I've tried, it's... She trailed off, old wounds aching. It's always ended in blood. Oren made a soft sound and pressed closer. But I killed for you, Kaela said, her voice barely above a breath. 4 men, and I didn't hesitate, didn't think, just moved. And I'd do it again. I would kill anyone who tried to hurt you, and that should terrify me, but it doesn't. It just is. The cub's breathing had slowed, sliding towards sleep, but its small body remained warm and trusting against her. Kaela closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. Out here, in the darkness, with this tiny creature depending on her for everything, she could almost pretend that the world was different, that she was different, that caring about something didn't have to mean losing it. Tomorrow, she murmured, we'll head for the Eastern Territories. Find somewhere remote. Build a shelter. You can grow, learn to hunt. And maybe, she opened her eyes looking down at the sleeping cub, maybe we can be safe, just for a little while. It was a fantasy, and she knew it. The frontier didn't allow for safe, and whoever wanted Oren badly enough to send mercenaries wouldn't just give up. But for tonight, in this small pocket of darkness, Kaela let herself believe it anyway. She kept watch until dawn, one hand resting on Oren's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing. And when the sun finally crept over the horizon, painting the scarred land in shades of gold and amber, she allowed herself one more moment of this strange, terrifying warmth. Then she woke Oren, packed their camp, and they moved on. Because the frontier was still out there, brutal and unforgiving. And somewhere behind them, Kaela knew someone was coming. 2 months had transformed everything. Kaela crouched beside a mountain stream, watching Oren stalk a fish with the focused intensity of a predator twice his size. The cub had grown fast. Too fast, she thought sometimes, watching him move with a coordination that seemed impossible for something only 3 months old. He was already the size of a full-grown dog, his white coat thick and lustrous, his pale blue eyes sharp with intelligence that unnerved her. Left, she murmured. It's drifting left. Oren's ears flicked, processing. He adjusted his position, paused silent on the wet stones, and when the fish came within range, he struck. Water exploded in a silver spray, and then Oren was trotting toward her with a struggling trout clamped in his jaws, tail wagging with pride. Good, Kaela said, taking the fish. Clean kill. She gutted it efficiently while Oren watched, learning. Everything was a lesson now. How to track. How to kill. How to read the wind and the land and the subtle signs that meant danger was approaching. She was teaching him to survive because survival was all she knew. But Oren was teaching her too, though she'd never admit it aloud. They'd made camp in the Eastern Territories, in a narrow valley carved between 2 mountains where a person could see for miles in every direction. Kaela had built a crude shelter against a rock face using fallen timber and clay. Nothing permanent, nothing that suggested she planned to stay. Just somewhere to sleep that wasn't exposed to the elements. The first week she'd kept expecting pursuit, kept her blade sharp and her sleep light, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. But days turned into weeks, and no one came. Either the surviving mercenary had died before delivering her message, or whoever hired them was regrouping. She should have moved on, should have kept running, kept Oren hidden and herself invisible. But something kept her in this valley. Maybe it was the clean water and plentiful game. Maybe it was the defensible position. Or maybe it was the way Oren looked at her every morning, like she was the center of his world, and leaving this place meant going back to the emptiness of constant movement. We'll stay another week, she told herself, the same lie she'd been telling for 8 weeks now. Oren dropped a stick at her feet, tail wagging expectantly. Kaela looked at the stick, then at the wolf. We don't have time for games. Oren nudged it closer, making a sound somewhere between a whine and a growl. Despite herself, Kaela felt something in her chest soften. She picked up the stick and threw it toward the stream. Oren bolted after it, a white streak against the green valley, and returned moments later with the stick and what looked suspiciously like a grin. They played for 10 minutes. 10 minutes Kaela couldn't afford, that served no purpose for survival. And when they finally stopped, she was breathing hard and Oren was panting happily. "You're making me soft," she muttered. Oren just licked her hand. That night, as they sat by their small fire, Kaela cleaned her weapons while Oren gnawed on the deer haunch she'd saved for him. The valley was quiet except for the crackle of flames and the distant call of a nightbird. Peaceful. Almost safe. "Your mother," Kaela said quietly, not looking at Oren. "She must have been something special. White coat like yours. Strong probably. Smart." She paused, choosing her words. "I wonder if she's looking for you. If she survived whatever happened." Oren's ears flicked, but he kept chewing. "Whoever sent those mercenaries, they wanted you alive. That means you're valuable. Important somehow." Kaela turned her saber, checking the edge. "Which means this piece won't last. It never does." The wolf finished his meal and moved to lie beside her, resting his head on her leg. It was a nightly ritual now, this contact, this closeness. Kaela had stopped fighting it. "I should leave you somewhere safe," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Find a settlement, maybe, or take you far north where the wild packs run. You'd survive. You're smart enough, strong enough." Oren made a sound of protest. "But I won't," Kaela admitted, her hand dropping to scratch behind his ears. "Because I'm selfish, because for the first time in 15 years, I don't feel—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Alone. The word she couldn't say. Because admitting she'd been lonely meant admitting she'd needed something beyond survival, and that was a weakness she'd never allowed herself. Oren pressed closer, as if understanding. They sat like that until the fire burned low, warrior and wolf, both scarred by a world that offered no mercy. And when Kaela finally lay down to sleep, Oren curled against her back, warm and solid and utterly trusting. She dreamed of blood and ash, of faces she'd killed and voices she'd lost, and woke gasping just before dawn. Oren was already awake, standing at attention near the shelter entrance, every muscle tense. Kayla's hand found her blade before her eyes fully focused. "What is it?" A low growl rumbled from Oren's chest. Then she heard it. Voices. Multiple voices carrying across the valley on the morning breeze, and the clink of metal. Weapons. Armor. Kaela was on her feet in seconds, gathering her pack, kicking dirt over the fire's remains. "Move! Now!" But Oren didn't move. He stood rigid, staring toward the valley's northern approach, that growl building to something deeper, more primal. "Oren, we have to—" The arrow took her in the left shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm, white-hot and immediate. Kaela stumbled, her pack falling, and looked down to see the fletched shaft protruding from her flesh. Not deep. Her leather pauldron had deflected most of the force, but enough to matter. "Target acquired," someone shouted. "Female warrior, approximately 30. Blonde hair, scarred face. That's her." Kaela grabbed Oren's scruff with her good hand. "Run, you stupid—" But Oren wasn't running. The young wolf planted himself between Kaela and the approaching voices, his growl turning into something that raised the hair on her neck. This wasn't the sound of a 3-month-old cub. This was the sound of something ancient and deadly. Men emerged from the tree line. Not 5 this time, 12. Heavily armed, well-coordinated, moving in formation. Professional soldiers, not frontier trash. "Stand down!" the leader called. He was a big man, scarred and gray at the temples, wearing the insignia of a mercenary captain. "We're not here to kill you. Just surrender the wolf and walk away." Kaela ripped the arrow from her shoulder with a hiss of pain, her blood running hot down her arm. "That's not happening." "We're authorized to use lethal force," the captain continued, his men spreading into a semicircle. "But our employer would prefer minimal bloodshed. You've got 10 seconds. "Your employer can go to hell," the captain sighed. "Told you she'd be difficult, boys. Do it quick." They rushed her. Kayla's world narrowed to blades and blood. She met the first soldier with her saber, deflecting his spear thrust and opening his throat. The second came from her wounded side, a mistake, and her knife found his kidney. But there were too many, coming too fast, and her injured shoulder was already slowing her down. A blade caught her across the ribs. Not deep, but another wound, another drain on her strength. She spun, took down a third man, but a fourth's club caught her in the back and she went down hard. "Pin her!" the captain shouted. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back. Kaela bucked and fought, but there were 4 of them now holding her down, and her vision was starting to blur from blood loss. "Get the wolf," the captain ordered. 2 soldiers moved toward Orin, nets at the ready, and that's when everything changed. Orin's howl split the morning air like a blade through flesh. It wasn't the yip of a cub, or even the call of a young wolf. It was something else entirely, a sound that resonated in Kaela's bones and made the soldiers freeze mid-step. The wolf began to grow. Kaela watched through pain-hazed eyes as Orin's body rippled, bones shifting, muscles expanding. In seconds, the 3-month-old cub had become a wolf the size of a small horse, his white coat blazing like silver fire in the dawn light, his eyes burning with an intelligence that was distinctly, terrifyingly human. "What in the bleeding?" one soldier began. Orin moved. The first soldier died before he could scream, Orin's jaws closing around his head and crushing it like an overripe fruit. The second tried to run and made it 3 steps before the massive wolf was on him, tearing through armor like parchment. The men holding Kaela released her and scrambled for weapons, but they were already dead and didn't know it yet. Orin tore through them with methodical efficiency, each kill precise and brutal. No wasted movement, no hesitation. In 30 seconds, 8 soldiers lay dead or dying. The captain and his 3 remaining men stood frozen, faces pale with terror. "Shapeshifter," the captain whispered. "It's a damned shapeshifter. Fall back now." They ran, crashing through the underbrush in their panic to escape. Orin let them go, his massive form turning back to Kaela. And as she watched, he began to shrink again, bones and muscle compacting until he was once more the size he'd been that morning. The young wolf padded over to her, blood matting his white fur, and pressed his nose against her face. "You," Kaela coughed, tasting copper, "you're not just a wolf." Orin made a sound that might have been agreement. Kaela's vision swam. Blood loss, probably. Or shock. Or the impossibility of what she'd just witnessed. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "Have to move," she mumbled. "They'll come back. More of them. Have to—" But darkness was already pulling at her, dragging her down. The last thing she felt was Orin curling around her, warm and protective, and then there was nothing. She woke to firelight and pain. Kaela's eyes snapped open, and she immediately tried to rise, to reach for weapons that weren't there. Strong hands pressed her back down. "Easy," a woman's voice said. "You've lost a lot of blood. Move too fast and you'll tear the stitches." Kaela blinked, trying to focus. She was in a cave. Not her shelter, somewhere else, lying on a bedroll with bandages wrapped around her shoulder and ribs. Her weapons were propped against the wall, close enough to reach but clearly moved. The woman sitting beside her was maybe 50, with iron-gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. She wore hunter's leathers and had the calm competence of a field medic. "Who are you?" Kaela rasped. "Name's Mira. Found you half dead in your valley with a very protective wolf standing guard." The woman gestured to the cave entrance where Orin sat watching, back to his normal size. "He wouldn't let me near you until I proved I was trying to help." "Smart animal. Or not animal, I'm guessing." Kaela's hand moved toward her knife. "Relax," Mira said. "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have spent 3 hours stitching you up. Besides, your wolf made it very clear what would happen if I hurt you." Kaela studied the woman's face, looking for deception, for threat. Found only tired sincerity. "Why help me?" "Because I've been tracking those mercenaries for 2 weeks, and anyone who kills 8 of them is either incredibly skilled or incredibly lucky. Either way, seemed worth keeping alive." Mira handed her a water skin. "Drink, then we need to talk." Kaela drank, the water cutting through the dryness in her throat. "Talk about what?" "About what you're protecting. About who's hunting you, and about the war that's coming." Mira settled back, her expression grim. "That wolf of yours, he's not just valuable, he's the key to everything." Kaela's fingers tightened on the water skin. "Explain." "His name is Orin Blackmore," Mira said quietly. "Heir to the Blackmore pack. Son of Darian Blackmore, the Alpha King who rules the largest shapeshifter territory in the eastern frontier." The words hung in the air like smoke. 6 months ago," Mira continued, Someone attacked the Blackmore compound during a full moon ceremony, killed 12 guards, injured the Alpha King himself, and stole his infant son. Every pack in 3 territories has been searching. The bounty for Oren's return is enough to buy a small kingdom. Kaela looked at Oren, who was still watching from the entrance. So those mercenaries were the 3rd group I've tracked. There are at least 5 more hunting parties out there, maybe more, and they're not all interested in returning him alive. Mira's voice dropped. Some of them want him dead, because if the heir dies, the Blackmore pack falls into chaos, and in that chaos, territories change hands. Politics, Kaela spat. Territorial pissing matches. It's bigger than that. The Blackmore pack is the only thing keeping the frontier from descending into total war. If they fall, every shapeshifter clan will fight for dominance. Hundreds will die, maybe thousands. Mira met her eyes. And you're sitting at the center of it, whether you like it or not. Kaela's mind raced. This was exactly what she'd avoided for 15 years. Getting tangled in something bigger than herself, something that would demand she choose sides and risk everything. I'll take him to the Blackmore territory, she said flatly, deliver him to his father, and walk away. It's not that simple. Why not? Mira hesitated. Because we don't know who ordered the attack. It could have been a rival pack. Could have been someone inside the Blackmore clan. Until we know, nowhere is safe. And Oren, she looked at the young wolf. He's bonded to you. Shapeshifter bonds are sacred, absolute. He won't go with anyone else, won't trust anyone else. He's an animal, a smart one, but he's a shapeshifter, Mira interrupted. Part wolf, part human, all instinct. And his instinct has chosen you as pack, as family. She leaned forward. You saved his life. You protected him. You've become his anchor to the world. Breaking that bond now would damage him, maybe permanently. Kaela felt her chest tighten. I didn't ask for this. No one ever does. Mira stood, moving to check the cave entrance. But you have a choice now. You can keep running, keep hiding, and hope you survive long enough for this to resolve itself. Or, she turned back. You can take him home. Face the Alpha King. Find out who's behind this and stop them. Why would I do that? Because they won't stop hunting you. Won't stop hunting him, and eventually they'll get lucky. Mira's expression softened. And because I think you care about that wolf more than you want to admit, I think the idea of him dying because you were too scared to act would destroy you. The words hit harder than Kaela expected. She looked at Oren, who was watching her with those 2 intelligent eyes, and felt something crack inside her walls. I'm not a hero, she said quietly. Good. Heroes get killed, but survivors? Mira smiled grimly. Survivors do what needs doing and live to regret it. That's what the frontier needs right now. Kaela closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to grab Oren and disappear into the wilderness where no one could find them. But Mira was right. They'd found her once. They'd find her again. And next time she might not be fast enough, strong enough, lucky enough. Where's this Blackmore territory? She asked. 3 weeks north, through some of the most dangerous terrain in the frontier. Mira pulled out a worn map. But I know the safe routes. I know where the patrols run. And I know how to get you there alive. Why help? Because I was Blackmore once, Mira said quietly. Served under Darien for 20 years before age and injury forced me to retire. He's a hard man, but he's fair. And he loves that boy more than his own life. She looked at Oren. I want to see them reunited, and I want whoever did this to pay. Kaela studied the map, tracing the route with her eyes. 3 weeks through hostile territory with a target on her back and a shapeshifter cub who apparently couldn't leave her side. It was suicide. It was exactly the kind of complication she'd spent 15 years avoiding. It was... Oren crossed the cave and pressed his head against her good shoulder, making a sound that was part whine, part comfort. Kaela's hand dropped to his fur, fingers tangling in the white coat. If I do this, she said slowly, I'm doing it my way. No armies, no grand gestures. We move fast, we move quiet, and if anyone gets in our way, they die. Understood? Mira nodded. Understood. And when we get there, when I deliver him to his father, I walk away. No strings, no obligations, no... Bonds don't work like that, Mira interrupted gently. But we can discuss that later. Right now you need rest. We leave at first light. Kaela wanted to argue, to demand more answers, but exhaustion was pulling at her. Her wounds throbbed, and her head felt like it was stuffed with wool. Fine, she muttered. First light. Mira moved to the cave entrance to take watch, leaving Kaela alone with Oren. The young wolf curled up beside her, careful of her injuries, and Kaela found her hand automatically moving to rest on his back. This is a mistake, she whispered. You know that, right? We're walking into a war and I don't even know which side we're supposed to be on. Oren made a sound that might have been disagreement. Your father, this Alpha King, he's going to expect things from me. Explanations, loyalty, things I don't give. Kaela stared at the cave ceiling. And when he realizes I'm just a killer with no honor and no allegiance, he'll... Oren lifted his head and licked her face, stopping the spiral of words. Kaela laughed, a broken, shocked sound. You really don't understand what you've gotten us into, do you? The wolf just settled back down, utterly content. Kaela closed her eyes, letting exhaustion claim her. Tomorrow they'd start north. Tomorrow she'd step deeper into this mess than she'd ever planned to go. But tonight, for just a few more hours, she could pretend that she was still just a wandering blade with no ties and no future. That the warmth in her chest when Oren pressed closer meant nothing. That she wasn't already so tangled in this bond that walking away would be impossible. The lies were comforting, even if she didn't believe them anymore. Morning came too fast. Kaela woke to find Mira already packing, her movements efficient and practiced. The older woman had prepared travel rations, dried meat, hard bread, something that looked like pemmican, and filled water skins from a nearby spring. How's the shoulder? Mira asked without looking up. Kaela tested it carefully. Stiff, painful, but functional. I'll live? Good. We've got a hard day ahead. The first checkpoint is 8 miles north, and we need to be past it before the afternoon patrols. Checkpoint? The frontier's not as lawless as people think. The major packs maintain territorial boundaries. Cross them without permission, you start a war. Mira handed her a strip of dried venison. Eat, then we move. They broke camp in silence, Kaela checking her weapons while Oren watched with alert eyes. The young wolf seemed to understand something important was happening, his usual playfulness replaced by focused attention. When they finally set out, Mira took point, navigating through dense forest with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and stone. Kaela followed, Oren at her side, every sense tuned for danger. The first hour passed without incident, then the second. By the third, Kayla's shoulder was screaming, and she was starting to wonder if this was a trap. How do you know so much about these territories? She asked, breaking the silence. 20 years of patrol routes burned into memory, Mira replied. I walked these forests when they were Blackmore controlled. Know where the safe houses are, where the water's clean, where the predators hunt. And you just left? Retired? Mira's jaw tightened. Got hurt. Bad leg wound that never healed right. Darian didn't want to risk me in combat, so he offered me a pension and a cabin on the territory's edge. She paused. Best thing he ever did for me, even if it hurt my pride. They walked in silence for another mile before Mira spoke again. He's a good leader, Darian. Tough, but fair. Doesn't tolerate weakness, but he protects his people. When his mate died giving birth to Oren, she trailed off. Something in him broke. He threw himself into raising that boy, protecting him, preparing him to lead someday. And then someone stole him. Kaela glanced at Oren, who was sniffing at something in the underbrush. Must have destroyed him. It did, but it also made him dangerous. Every resource, every ally, every favor he had, he spent it all searching. And when he finds out who took his son, Mira's expression went cold. There won't be enough pieces left to bury. The word should have worried Kaela, should have made her reconsider this entire plan, but instead she felt something like respect. A father who'd burned the world for his child. That was something she understood. We're being followed, Oren's warning came not as words but as a low rumble in his chest. Kayla's hand dropped to her blade. How many? Mira had already stopped scanning the trees. Can't tell. Oren? The young wolf's ears swiveled, tracking sounds Kaela couldn't hear. Then he looked at Mira and deliberately raised one paw, then another, then a fourth, then started over. 8, Mira translated. At least 8. Same as before? Kaela asked. Different scent, Mira said, which meant she could read shapeshifter tells too. Not mercenaries, shapeshifters. A hunting pack. Before Kaela could respond, figures emerged from the trees. Not soldiers this time. These were wolves, massive and varied in color, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. And at their center, a huge black wolf with scars across his muzzle and eyes that burned with intelligence. The black wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming, until a man stood where the animal had been. He was tall, heavily muscled, with the same scars on his human face and an expression of cold authority. "Mira," he said, his voice like gravel. "Been a long time." "Garrett," Mira replied, her tone neutral. "Didn't expect to see you this far south." "Didn't expect to be here." Garrett's eyes moved to Kaela, then dropped to Oren. But when word came through about a white wolf cub traveling with a human warrior, had to investigate. He smiled, showing too many teeth. "And what do you know? It's the Alpha King's lost heir." Kayla's blade was in her hand before she consciously decided to draw it. "You're not taking him." "Easy, killer," Garrett said, though his pack tensed around him. "We're not here to fight. We're here to escort you to Blackmore territory. Make sure you arrive intact." "Since when does Blackmore send escorts?" Mira asked suspiciously. "Since the Alpha King got word that his son was alive and heading north with an unknown warrior." Garrett's expression hardened. "He wants to meet her, personally, before she gets anywhere near his heir." Kaela felt her stomach drop. Of course. Of course the Alpha King wouldn't just accept his son back without questions, without determining if she was a threat. "I saved his life," she said flatly. "So you say. But you also killed 12 of his people. They were mercenaries trying to murder his son, and bonded with him, which means you've got leverage over the heir whether you want it or not." Garrett crossed his arms. "So, here's how this works. You come with us, peaceful-like. Answer the Alpha's questions, prove you're not a threat, and then maybe, you get to walk away. And if I refuse, then we take you by force and things get ugly." He gestured at his pack. "Your choice." Kaela looked at Mira, who gave a subtle shake of her head. 8 shapeshifters against 1 wounded warrior. Those were bad odds even on her best day. "Fine," Kaela said, sheathing her blade. "But Oren stays with me. Non-negotiable." Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "He stays with you. But if you try anything, and I mean anything, we put you down. Clear?" "Crystal." "Good. We move out in 5, Sen. Stay close, keep quiet, and maybe you'll survive long enough to meet the Alpha King." As Garrett shifted back to wolf form and his pack began moving north, Kaela felt Oren press against her leg. She looked down to find the young wolf watching her with worried eyes. "It's okay," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if she was lying. "We'll figure this out." But as they fell into formation with the Blackmore pack, surrounded by shapeshifters who clearly didn't trust her, Kaela realized she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She was walking into the heart of a kingdom she didn't understand, to face a king who had every reason to see her as an enemy. And the only thing standing between her and death was a 3-month-old wolf who loved her. The frontier had taught her that attachment was death. She was about to find out if that lesson was true. The journey north took 4 days that felt like 4 years. Garrett's pack moved with military precision, maintaining a perimeter around Kaela and Oren that was equal parts protection and imprisonment. They spoke little, communicating in growls and body language that Kaela couldn't fully decipher, and when they did shift to human form during rest stops, their eyes never left her. "They think I'm going to run," Kaela muttered to Mira on the second night, watching 3 wolves patrol the camp's edge. "Can you blame them?" Mira poked at the fire with a stick. "You're an unknown element carrying the most valuable thing in their world. They're not going to relax until Darian makes his judgment. And what if his judgment is execution? Then Oren will probably tear the compound apart trying to protect you, and we'll all die in the chaos." Mira's tone was maddeningly casual. "So let's hope it doesn't come to that." Kaela looked at Oren, who was sleeping pressed against her leg, his white coat rising and falling with each breath. The young wolf had been unusually quiet since Garrett's pack arrived, his playfulness replaced by a watchful tension that mirrored her own. "He's scared," Kaela said quietly. "He's smart. He can feel the pack's hostility." Mira glanced at the sleeping wolf. "But he's not leaving your side." That bond is stronger than their authority, and that makes them nervous. Why? Because in shapeshifter culture, the bond between packmates is sacred. It's the foundation of everything: loyalty, hierarchy, survival. And Oren has bonded to an outsider. Mira's expression grew serious. That's unprecedented, dangerous. It challenges their entire social structure. Kaela felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. So they see me as a threat to their way of life. Some do. Others are just confused. But Darian, Mira paused, Darian will see you as either the person who saved his son or the person who stole him. There's no middle ground with him. Sleep came hard that night, and when it did, Kaela dreamed of a massive wolf with eyes like cold fire, judging her and finding her wanting. On the fourth day, they reached Blackmoor territory. Kaela knew they'd crossed the boundary before anyone said a word. The forest changed, became denser, more deliberately maintained. Trees marked with claw symbols, paths cleared and reinforced, and everywhere the scent of wolf. "We're being watched," she said quietly. "We have been for the last hour," Garrett replied, the first words he'd spoken to her directly in 2 days. "The outer patrols tracked us from the moment we crossed the line. By now, everyone in the compound knows we're coming." "How big is this compound?" "You'll see." They emerged from the forest into a valley that stole Kaela's breath. She'd expected something crude, maybe a fortified village, some wooden walls and primitive structures. What she found was a thriving settlement that looked like it had been carved from the land itself. Stone buildings with thatched roofs clustered around a central longhouse that could have held 200 people. Training grounds where warriors sparred, gardens and livestock pens. Children running through the streets, laughing. A kingdom. Not a camp or a hideout, but an actual functioning kingdom. "Holy shit," Kaela breathed. "The Blackmoor pack has held this territory for 3 generations, Mira said with barely concealed pride. "What you're seeing is the result of 70 years of building, defending, and surviving." As they descended into the valley, people stopped to watch. Kaela felt their eyes on her, curious, hostile, calculating. A human woman walking into their territory, bonded to their missing heir. She might as well have been wearing a target. Oren pressed closer to her leg, and she rested a hand on his head. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Garrett led them straight to the longhouse. The doors, massive things made of oak and iron, stood open, and inside Kaela could see torches burning and figures moving in the shadows. "Wait here," Garrett commanded, then shifted and disappeared inside. Kaela stood in the courtyard, surrounded by Garrett's pack and what felt like half the compound's population. The silence was oppressive, broken only by whispers that cut off whenever she turned her head. "They're afraid of you," Mira said quietly. "Good. Fear keeps people predictable. It also makes them dangerous." Before Kaela could respond, Garrett emerged from the longhouse in human form. His expression was unreadable. "He'll see you, now, just you and the cub." He looked at Mira. "You stay out here." "Like hell," Kaela started, but Mira cut her off. "It's fine. This is between you and Darian." The older woman squeezed her shoulder. "Be honest, be direct, and for the love of everything, don't threaten him." "I don't take orders well." "I noticed. Try anyway." Kaela took a deep breath, checked that her blades were secure, and walked toward the longhouse. Oren stayed glued to her side, his body tense with anticipation. The interior was dim, lit by torches mounted in iron sconces. A long table ran down the center, surrounded by chairs carved from dark wood. Tapestries hung on the walls depicting wolves in various poses, hunting, fighting, howling at the moon. At the far end of the room, seated in a chair that might as well have been a throne, was the man who could only be Darian Blackmoor. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a kingdom. His hair was black shot through with silver, pulled back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Scars crisscrossed his arms and chest, visible because he wore only a sleeveless leather vest. And his eyes were the same pale blue as Oren's. Those eyes locked onto Kaela with an intensity that made her hand twitch toward her blade. Stop there, Darian commanded, his voice a deep rumble that filled the room. Kaela stopped 10 feet from the table. Oren sat beside her, watching his father with an expression she couldn't read. For a long moment, no one spoke. Darian studied her with the focused attention of a predator evaluating prey, taking in her scarred face, her weapons, the bandages still visible beneath her shirt. "You're the one who killed 8 of my soldiers," he said finally. "They were mercenaries trying to capture your son, so yes. And before that, you killed 4 more. They were trying to kidnap him. And you stopped them." Darian's expression didn't change. "Why?" The question hung in the air. Kaela could feel the weight of it, the importance. This was the moment that would determine everything. "Because they were going to hurt him," she said simply. "And I don't tolerate that. You don't even know him, didn't know who he was, what he was worth, yet you killed for him." Darian leaned forward. "Why would a human warrior risk her life for a wolf cub?" Kaela met his eyes. "Because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing." Darian's laugh was harsh, bitter. "You've been in the frontier long enough to know there's no such thing as right, only survival." "Maybe. But that night, survival meant protecting something that couldn't protect itself." Kayla's jaw tightened. "I didn't know he was your son. Didn't know about shapeshifters or territories or any of this. I just knew he was going to die if I didn't act." Darian stood, his full height making Kaela feel small for the first time in years. He walked around the table, each step deliberate, until he stood directly in front of her. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked quietly. "By bonding with him, by making yourself essential to his well-being, you've created a problem I can't easily solve. I didn't ask for the bond." "No, but you have it anyway. And now my son, my heir, won't accept anyone else, won't trust anyone else. You've become his entire world." Darian's expression hardened. "Which means I can't kill you, can't exile you, can't do anything to remove you without damaging him. So tell me, Kaela Frost, what am I supposed to do with you?" The question felt like a trap. Kayla's mind raced, weighing options, calculating angles. But Oren was pressing against her leg, trembling slightly, and she realized the young wolf could sense the tension, the danger. "Let me leave," she said. "I'll go far away, somewhere he can't follow. The bond will fade, he'll forget me." "Bonds don't fade, not for shapeshifters." Darian's voice dropped. "He would spend the rest of his life searching for you, pining for you, incomplete. Then what do you want from me? I want to understand why my son trusts you more than he trusts me." The pain in Darian's voice was raw, undisguised. "I want to know what you did, what you showed him, that made him choose you over his own blood." Kaela looked down at Oren, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. "I didn't do anything special. I protected him, fed him, taught him to survive, and I didn't lie to him or use him or pretend to be something I'm not. You treated him like he mattered." "He does matter." Darian's expression cracked, just for a moment, showing the grief beneath. "He's all I have left. His mother died bringing him into this world, and I've spent every day since trying to be enough for both of us. And then someone stole him, and I thought—" His hands clenched into fists. "I thought I'd lost everything." Before Kaela could respond, Oren moved. The young wolf crossed the distance to his father and sat down, looking up at the Alpha King with what could only be recognition. Darian dropped to one knee, his massive frame shaking, and reached out with trembling hands. Oren leaned into the touch, and Darian gathered his son against his chest with a sound that was half sob, half growl. "Oren," he whispered. "My boy. My son." Kaela felt her throat tighten, her eyes burning. This was a reunion she had no part in, a moment between father and son that she was intruding on. She started to back away, to give them privacy. "Stay," Darian commanded without looking at her. Kaela froze. Darian held Oren for another long moment, then gently released him. The young wolf immediately trotted back to Kaela and pressed against her leg, and she saw the Alpha King's expression darken. "He's loyal to you," Darian said. "Completely. Even now, even with me here, he chooses to stand with you." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize for saving his life." Darian stood, his composure returning. But understand this. You're now part of something bigger than yourself. My son has claimed you as pack, which means this territory has claimed you. You can't leave. You can't walk away. You're Blackmore now, whether you want to be or not. Kaela's hands curled into fists. I don't belong to anyone. You belong to him. Darian gestured at Oren, and he belongs to me. So by extension, you're mine to protect, to command, to, I'm not a possession. No. But you're not free anymore either. Darian's voice was cold, final. That's the price of the bond. That's what you accepted when you chose to save him. Kaela felt rage building in her chest, hot and wild. This was exactly what she'd feared, what she'd run from for 15 years. Chains, obligations, someone else controlling her life. I'll break the bond, she said through clenched teeth. I'll find a way to You'll kill him. Darian stepped closer. That's what breaking a bond does to a shapeshifter this young. It destroys them from the inside out. So unless you want my son's death on your conscience, you'll accept your new reality. Kaela looked at Oren, at the young wolf watching her with complete trust, and felt her rage collapse into something close to despair. Darian was right. She couldn't leave without hurting Oren, couldn't run without damaging the one thing in this world she actually cared about. She was trapped, not by chains or walls, but by something infinitely stronger, her own heart. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Your loyalty, your strength, your commitment to protecting him as he grows. Darian's expression softened fractionally. You've proven you can keep him alive. Now prove you can help him become the leader he needs to be. I'm not a teacher. I'm a killer. Then teach him to kill, teach him to survive, teach him everything that kept you alive in the frontier. Darian moved back to his chair. But do it here, within these walls, where I can see him every day and know he's safe. Kaela felt the weight of the offer settling on her shoulders. Stay. Become part of this pack, this kingdom. Give up her freedom, her independence, everything she'd fought to maintain. But the alternative was walking away and watching Oren suffer. There was no real choice. Fine, she said, the word tasting like ash. I'll stay. I'll train him. But I do it my way, and you don't interfere. Agreed. But in return, you follow pack law. You answer to my authority. And you... The doors burst open. A warrior stumbled in, bleeding from a wound in his side, his face pale with shock. Alpha, the western perimeter, they're under attack. Darian was on his feet instantly. Who? Thornridge Pack, at least 50 warriors. They're demanding we surrender Oren or they'll burn the compound to the ground. The room went silent. Kaela felt Oren tense against her leg, and her hand dropped to her blade. Thornridge, Darian said, his voice deadly calm. They're behind the kidnapping. They're saying the cub is rightfully theirs, the warrior continued, that you stole him from their territory, and they've come to reclaim what was taken. That's a lie, Darian snarled. Oren was born here, in this compound, under the protection of Blackmore law. They don't care about truth, Alpha. They care about power. And if they can claim your heir, they can challenge your authority over the entire territory. Kaela's mind raced. This was bigger than a kidnapping. This was a coup, carefully orchestrated to destabilize the Blackmore pack and create a power vacuum. How long until they reach the compound? Darian demanded. 10 minutes. Maybe less. They're moving fast. Darian turned to Kaela. Take Oren to the inner sanctum. There's a reinforced chamber beneath this building where he'll be safe. I'm not hiding while you fight. You're protecting my son. That's more important than any battle. Darian's eyes burned with intensity. Keep him alive. That's all that matters. Kaela wanted to argue, to insist she could fight, but Oren was pressing against her leg hard enough to hurt, and she realized the young wolf was terrified. Show me the chamber, she said. Garrett appeared at her side. Follow me, quickly. They moved through a hidden door behind the throne, down a narrow staircase carved into stone. The air grew cool and damp, and Kaela could hear the muffled sounds of the compound mobilizing above. Warriors shouting, weapons being distributed, orders being given. The chamber was small but secure, with walls of solid rock and a heavy iron door. Garrett lit a torch and handed it to her. Don't open this door for anyone but Darian or me, he said. If Thornridge breaks through, they'll kill everyone to get to Orin. They'll have to kill me first. Garrett studied her for a moment. You know, I didn't trust you. Didn't believe you were just a wanderer who happened to save the heir. But the way you're standing there, ready to die for a cub that isn't even yours. He shook his head. Maybe Darian's right about you. Right about what? That you're exactly what this pack needs. Garrett turned to leave, then paused. Keep him safe, Kaela. Whatever else happens, keep him safe. Then he was gone, and the iron door slammed shut, leaving Kaela and Orin alone in the flickering torchlight. Kaela immediately began checking the room for alternate exits, weak points, anything she could use if they were discovered. There were none. This was a bunker, designed to withstand siege. The only way in or out was through that door. Orin whined, pacing nervously. I know, Kaela murmured, kneeling beside him. I don't like being caged either, but your father's right. You're what matters. As long as you survive, Blackmore survives. The young wolf pressed his head against her chest, seeking comfort. Kaela wrapped her arms around him, feeling his rapid heartbeat, his trembling. This wasn't the confident predator who'd killed 8 soldiers. This was a frightened child who didn't understand why his world was falling apart. Listen to me, she said quietly. Whatever happens up there, whatever you hear, I need you to stay calm. Stay quiet. Can you do that? Orin looked up at her with those pale blue eyes and gave a small nod. Good. Because I promise you I'm not letting anyone take you. Not Thornridge, not anyone. You're safe with me. It was a promise she had no business making, a promise that might get her killed. But as Orin settled against her, his breathing slowing, Kaela realized she meant every word. Above them, the sounds of battle began. Howls and screams echoed through the stone, punctuated by the clash of steel and the crackle of fire. Kaela counted seconds, trying to gauge the flow of combat, but it was impossible. All she could do was wait and listen and hope that Darian's forces were strong enough. Minutes crawled by, then an hour. The sounds of fighting grew closer, then retreated, then surged again. Kaela kept her blades ready, positioned between Orin and the door, every muscle coiled to strike. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Kayla's heart hammered. Silence could mean victory, or it could mean everyone above was dead. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, measured, multiple people. Kaela raised her blade. Orin, get behind me! The young wolf obeyed, pressing into the corner. The door's lock rattled. Someone was opening it from the outside. Kayla's grip tightened. If this was Thornridge, she'd take as many of them with her as possible before they... The door swung open to reveal Darian, covered in blood and breathing hard. Behind him stood Garrett and 3 other warriors, all looking equally battered. It's over, Darian said. Thornridge is retreating. Kaela lowered her blade, relief flooding through her. How many did we lose? 12 dead, 20 wounded, but we held. Darian's eyes found Orin. Is he hurt? He's fine. Scared, but fine. Darian stepped into the chamber and knelt, opening his arms. This time, Orin ran to him without hesitation, and father and son held each other while Kaela looked away, giving them privacy. Thornridge will be back, Garrett said quietly. This was just a test. They wanted to see our defenses, our response time. Next time, they'll bring more warriors. Then we prepare for next time, Darian said, standing with Orin in his arms. We reinforce the perimeter, call in our allied packs, and we make it clear that anyone who threatens my son dies. He looked at Kaela. That includes you. You're not just Orin's guardian anymore. You're part of this pack's defense. I need your skills, your experience, your willingness to kill without hesitation. Kaela felt the trap closing tighter. You want me to be a soldier. I want you to be whatever keeps my son alive. Darian's expression was hard. Can you do that? Kaela looked at Orin, who was watching her from his father's arms with complete trust. The young wolf who'd changed everything. Who'd cracked open her armor and shown her that caring about something wasn't weakness. It was the only thing that made survival worth it. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good. Darian turned to Garrett. Get her a proper room. Give her access to our armory, and start integrating her into our defense rotations. You want her training with the pack? Garrett looked skeptical. I want her leading them. She killed 8 trained warriors while wounded and protecting Orin. That's the kind of fighter we need. The pack won't follow a human. They'll follow whoever I tell them to follow. Darian's voice carried absolute authority. And I'm telling them to follow her. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. No one spoke. No one was stupid enough to challenge the Alpha King. Darian looked back at Kaela. Welcome to Blackmoor, Kaela Frost. I hope you survived long enough to regret it. Then he carried Orin out of the chamber, leaving Kaela standing in the torchlight, her blade still in her hands. Her entire life irrevocably changed. She'd come here to deliver Orin and walk away. Instead, she'd become part of a war she didn't understand, bound to a pack she didn't choose, and responsible for protecting a kingdom she'd never wanted. The frontier had taught her that attachment was death. But standing in that chamber, listening to the sounds of wounded warriors being tended above, Kaela realized the lesson was incomplete. Attachment was death. But it was also the only thing worth dying for. And as Garrett led her upstairs into her new life, past warriors who looked at her with suspicion and fear, Kaela made herself a promise. If she was going to be trapped here, bound by a bond she couldn't break, and obligations she'd never asked for, then she'd do it on her terms. She'd protect Orin. She'd help defend this kingdom. She'd become whatever Darian needed her to be. But she'd never stop being Kaela Frost, the wandering blade who trusted no one and survived everything. Even if it meant standing against the entire frontier to keep one white wolf safe. The question was whether the frontier would let her, or whether her past would come for her long before Thornridge could finish what they'd started. The room they gave her was small but functional. A stone chamber in the compound's eastern wing with a narrow bed, a chest for belongings she didn't have, and a window that overlooked the training grounds. Kaela stood at that window now, watching the dawn light creep across the valley, and wondered how she'd gone from a wandering blade to a permanent fixture in someone else's war. Below, warriors were already assembling for morning drills despite yesterday's battle. She could see the wounded moving slower, favoring injuries, but moving nonetheless. The dead had been burned at midnight in a ceremony she'd watched from a distance, their ashes scattered in the forest they'd died defending. 12 lives. 12 people who'd had families, friends, futures, gone because Thornridge wanted power and saw Orin as the key to claiming it. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called without turning. The door opened to reveal Mira carrying a tray with bread, dried fruit, and what smelled like venison stew. "Thought you might be hungry. You didn't eat last night." "Wasn't hungry. You will be after training." Mira set the tray on the chest. "Darian scheduled you to work with the combat unit starting today. Garrett will be running the session." Kaela finally turned from the window. "They're really going to let me train them?" "Let you? You're going to lead half of them by the end of the week, whether they like it or not." Mira's expression was knowing. Darian doesn't make empty declarations. If he said you're part of the defense, then you are. The pack will follow or face consequences. "They hate me. They fear you. There's a difference." Mira settled into the room's only chair. "You killed 8 of their warriors in a single fight while protecting their heir. That's the kind of reputation that buys respect in shapeshifter culture." "I thought I killed mercenaries." "You did. But to the pack, any warrior who dies in service, even mercenaries hired temporarily, counts as theirs. You took 8 lives, and you did it protecting something they all value." Mira paused. "That makes you dangerous, valuable, and utterly unpredictable." Kaela crossed her arms. "So they'll watch me, waiting for me to make a mistake." "Some will. Others will challenge you directly. Shapeshifter culture runs on hierarchy and strength. If you want their respect, you'll have to earn it the hard way." "By beating them into submission?" "By proving you're worthy of standing beside them." Mira stood. "Eat. Then get to the training grounds. And Kaela? Don't hold back. They won't." After Mira left, Kaela forced herself to eat the stew. It was good, rich, and savory, and she realized she hadn't had a proper meal in days. When she finished, she strapped on her blades, checked her throwing knives, and headed downstairs. The compound was fully awake now, people moving through the streets with purposeful efficiency. Children were being herded toward what looked like a schoolhouse. Craftsmen were opening workshops. Guards were changing shifts at the perimeter. A functioning society. Not just warriors living in tents, but families building lives. Kaela had never seen anything like it in the frontier. The training grounds occupied the compound's western edge, a large open space surrounded by wooden posts and practice dummies. 50 warriors were assembled when she arrived, all in various stages of readiness. They stopped talking when they saw her, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Garrett stood at the center, arms crossed, watching her approach. "You're late." "By 30 seconds. In combat, 30 seconds is the difference between life and death." He gestured at the assembled warriors. "These are our frontline defenders. Most have been fighting since they could walk. All of them survived yesterday's attack, and none of them want to train under a human." Kaela met his stare. "Then this will be interesting." A ripple of muttering went through the crowd. Garrett raised a hand for silence. "The Alpha has decreed that Kaela Frost will be training with us and eventually leading combat units. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with him directly." No one moved. "Good. Now, Kaela killed 8 warriors while wounded and protecting the air. I want to see how she did it." Garrett pointed at 3 of the largest warriors. "You 3. Attack her. Full contact. No holding back." The warriors exchanged glances. One of them, a massive man with a scar running down his face, stepped forward. "You want us to hurt her?" "I want you to treat her like an enemy combatant." Garrett's smile was cold. "Let's see if her reputation is earned or luck." Kayla's pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady. This was a test, not just of her skills, but of her willingness to prove herself on their terms. She drew her blades. The 3 warriors spread out, flanking her in a classic pincer formation. The scarred one had a longsword. The second carried a spear. The third had dual hatchets and looked fast. They attacked simultaneously. Kaela moved on pure instinct, her body remembering 15 years of survival. She deflected the spear with her saber, ducked under the longsword swing, and used the momentum to drive her knife toward the hatchet fighter's ribs. He blocked, but she'd expected that, using the contact to pivot away from the longsword's follow-up. The fight became a blur of steel and motion. The warriors were good, better than the mercenaries she'd killed, but they fought with pack coordination that made them predictable. They anticipated each other's moves, which meant Kaela could anticipate them too. She exploited every gap, every moment of hesitation. When the spear fighter overextended, she swept his legs and put her blade to his throat. When the hatchet fighter tried to rush her, she sidestepped and hammered the pommel of her saber into his temple, dropping him. That left the scarred warrior. He circled her warily, his longsword held in a high guard. "You're fast, you're slow." He lunged, the longsword sweeping in a vicious arc meant to decapitate. Kaela went low, rolled past him, and came up with both blades crossed at his throat. "Dead," she said quietly. The training ground had gone silent. Kaela released the warrior and stepped back, sheathing her blades. Her shoulder throbbed where her wound had partially reopened, but she kept her expression neutral. Garrett walked over to the 3 defeated warriors who were picking themselves up. "That took 90 seconds. In a real fight, you'd all be corpses." He turned to the assembled crowd. "This is what frontier survival looks like. No honor duels, no fair fights, just efficiency and violence. If you want to defend this compound against Thornridge's next attack, you need to think like she does." One of the warriors, a woman with short dark hair and a challenging expression, spoke up. "She fights like a human. We fight as wolves. How does that translate?" "Good question." Garrett looked at Kaela. "Show them." Kaela frowned. "Show them what?" "How a human beats a shapeshifter." Understanding dawned. This wasn't just about proving she could fight humans. They needed to see if her tactics worked against their transformed state. "You want me to fight a wolf?" Kaela said flatly. "I want you to fight me." Garrett stepped into the training circle. Shifted form, full combat, first blood wins. Kayla's mind raced. Fighting a human was one thing. Fighting a massive shapeshifter wolf was something else entirely. But backing down now would destroy any credibility she'd just earned. "Fine. But when I win, I want full access to your strategic planning sessions." "Deal. And when I win, you admit that humans don't belong in pack leadership." They faced each other in the center of the circle. The assembled warriors pressed closer, forming a ring. Kaela could feel their anticipation, their eagerness to see the human put in her place. Garrett began to shift. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscle expanded. In seconds, where a man had stood, there was now a wolf the size of a horse, black-furred and heavily scarred, with eyes that burned with intelligence and challenge. Kaela drew her blades and waited. Garrett circled her, looking for an opening. Shapeshifter wolves were fast, strong, and had the advantage of natural weapons. But they were also larger targets, and their attack patterns were more predictable than a human's varied fighting styles. He lunged, jaws snapping toward her throat. Kaela dropped and rolled, letting his momentum carry him past. She came up slashing, her saber drawing a line of blood across his shoulder. First blood. But Garrett didn't stop. He spun with impossible speed, his claws raking toward her midsection. Kaela twisted away, but not fast enough. Claws caught her vest, tearing through leather and scoring her ribs. Pain flared. They were even now, both bleeding. The fight intensified. Garrett pressed his advantage, using his size and strength to force Kaela backward. She gave ground strategically, watching his pattern, waiting for the opening. It came when he reared up for a crushing blow with his front paws. Kaela dove forward, going under him instead of away. Her knife found the soft flesh of his underbelly, drawing a deep cut that wasn't fatal, but would hurt like hell. Garrett yelped and staggered. Kaela rolled out from under him and came to her feet, both blades ready. The wolf shifted back to human form, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his bleeding stomach. Enough. You've made your point. Kaela lowered her weapons. Which is? That size doesn't matter if your opponent knows where to strike. Garrett straightened, wincing. You fight dirty. I fight to survive. There's a difference. Garrett looked at the assembled warriors. This is the person the Alpha wants training you. This is the mentality we need against Thornridge. Questions? The dark-haired woman raised her hand. Will she teach us to fight like that? If she's willing, Garrett said, looking at Kaela. Kaela surveyed the crowd. 50 warriors, all watching her with new expressions. Not quite respect yet, but something close. Recognition. Acknowledgement that she belonged on this field. I'll teach you, she said, but we do it my way. No pack traditions, no honor codes, just what works, what keeps you alive. Some of our traditions are sacred, someone called out. Then keep them for ceremonies. In combat, the only thing that's sacred is going home alive. Kaela's voice hardened. Thornridge is coming back with more warriors, better tactics. If you want to survive, you need to be willing to throw out everything you think you know about fair fighting and learn to be brutal. Silence. Then slowly the dark-haired woman stepped forward. Teach us. One by one, others echoed her. Not all of them, but enough. Garrett nodded. Combat training starts tomorrow at dawn. Today, Kaela rests and we debrief yesterday's attack. Dismissed. As the warriors dispersed, Garrett approached Kaela. That was bold. It was necessary. Maybe, but you've made enemies. Some of these warriors will never accept a human in leadership, no matter how skilled you are. Then they'll learn to live with it or challenge me directly. Kaela sheathed her blades. I didn't ask to be here, Garrett, but now that I am, I'm not going to apologize for being good at what I do. Fair enough. He studied her for a moment. You're bleeding. Get that looked at before it gets infected. Kaela glanced down at her torn vest and the fresh blood seeping through. It's nothing. It's something if it slows you down tomorrow. Infirmary, now. That's an order. She wanted to argue but recognized the futility. Fine. The infirmary occupied a building near the longhouse, staffed by 3 healers who looked up with professional interest when Kaela entered. The youngest, a woman maybe 25 with gentle hands and sharp eyes, gestured her to a cot. I heard you beat Garrett, she said, examining the claw marks. Impressive. I got lucky. You got skilled. There's a difference. The healer began cleaning the wounds with something that stung. I'm Sarah. I've been patching up warriors for 5 years. These are clean cuts. Should heal fine if you don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Fighting again before these close. Training without proper bandaging. Generally being reckless. Sarah began stitching with practiced efficiency. You know, typical warrior behavior. Despite herself, Kaela smiled. You've seen a lot of warriors. Too many. Most of them think they're invincible until they're bleeding out on my table. Sarah tied off the stitches and applied a poultice that smelled of herbs and something sharp. But you're different. You know you're mortal. That's why you're still alive. Mortality is the best teacher. So is pain. Sarah wrapped bandages around Kaela's ribs. There. Don't get hit in the same spot for at least a week. I'll try. You'll fail, but I appreciate the effort. Sarah cleaned her hands. Word of advice? The warriors will test you constantly now. Every training session, every patrol, every moment you're visible. They'll push to find your breaking point. I don't have one. Everyone has one. The trick is not letting them see it. Sarah's expression grew serious. But when they do find it, and they will, make sure you're somewhere safe, because shapeshifters don't understand mercy for weakness. Kaela absorbed that, then nodded. Thanks for the stitching. Thanks for making today interesting. This compound has been too quiet since Oren disappeared. Mention of the young wolf reminded Kaela she hadn't seen him since yesterday. Where is he? With his father. They're in the nursery. It's a secure building where young shapeshifters learn to control their shifting. Darian's been teaching him. Sarah paused. You could visit if you want. The bond doesn't care about distance, but seeing you might help him settle. Kaela hesitated. Part of her wanted to see Oren, to make sure he was adjusting, but another part worried that her presence would complicate his reconnection with his father. Maybe later, she said. Don't wait too long. He's been asking for you. The words hit harder than they should have. Kaela left the infirmary and made her way back to her room, her ribs aching and her mind churning. She'd proven herself on the training grounds, earned grudging acceptance from some of the warriors. But what did that mean for Oren? For her place here? She was a fighter, a survivor, not a mother figure, not someone equipped to help a young shapeshifter navigate his world. But the bond didn't care about what she was equipped for. That evening, she found herself walking toward the nursery despite her reservations. It was a low stone building with reinforced doors and windows that could be shuttered. Inside, she could hear voices, Darian's deep rumble and a higher, younger tone that made her chest tighten. She knocked. The door opened to reveal Darian, still in his training leathers, looking tired. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Not quite welcome, but not hostility either. He's been waiting for you, Darian said simply, stepping aside. The nursery's interior was warm, lit by a central fire. Cushions and blankets covered the floor, and toys, carved animals, balls, sticks, were scattered around. In the center of it all sat Oren in his wolf form, looking larger than he had yesterday. The young wolf's head snapped up when Kaela entered, and his whole body vibrated with excitement. He bounded over, nearly knocking her down with his enthusiasm, and she found herself laughing despite the pain in her ribs. Easy, easy, she said, scratching behind his ears. You'll tear my stitches. Oren made a sound that was pure joy, pressing his head against her stomach. Darian watched from near the fire, his expression unreadable. He's been restless all day, wouldn't focus on the shifting exercises, kept looking toward the door. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrupt. Don't apologize. Darian moved closer, studying the interaction between her and his son. The bond is stronger than I realized. He needs you as much as he needs me. Maybe more. The admission seemed to cost him. Kaela looked up, meeting his eyes. I'm not trying to replace you. I know, but you've become essential to him in ways I can't match. Darian crouched beside Oren, running a hand through the white fur. His mother died before she could bond with him. I've tried to be enough, but there are things a father can't provide. What things? Softness, gentleness, the kind of love that doesn't come with expectations of strength and leadership. Darian's voice dropped. You protect him, but you also let him be young. Let him play. I've been so focused on making him a worthy heir that I forgot he's still a child. Kaela felt something shift in her chest. She'd thought Darian saw her as a threat, a complication. But looking at him now, she saw only a father struggling to balance duty and love. You're a good father, she said quietly. He knows you love him. Does he? Or does he just know I expect greatness from him? Darian stood, his shoulders sagging slightly. You saved his life, Kaela. Not just from those mercenaries, but from the weight I was putting on him. You let him be Oren instead of the heir. That's a gift I can't repay. You don't need to repay it. No, but I need to acknowledge it. Darian moved toward the door, then paused. Stay with him tonight. Let him sleep beside you like he did in the wilderness. He needs that more than my lessons in pack hierarchy. Then he was gone, leaving Kaela alone with Orin in the warm nursery. The young wolf looked up at her, tail wagging slowly. Your father is trying, Kaela said, settling onto the cushions. Give him a chance. Orin curled up beside her, resting his head in her lap. And as she sat there, stroking his soft fur, Kaela realized something had fundamentally changed. She'd stopped thinking of this as temporary, stopped planning her escape. Somewhere in the chaos of the last few days, she'd accepted that this was her life now. Not the wandering, the isolation, the careful distance, but this. A pack, a purpose, a young wolf who needed her. It terrified her, but it also felt right in a way nothing had felt in 15 years. We're going to figure this out, she whispered to Orin. I don't know how, but we will. I promise. The young wolf's breathing slowed, sliding toward sleep. Kaela leaned back against the cushions, letting exhaustion pull at her. Tomorrow would bring more training, more challenges, more tests of whether she belonged. But tonight, in this quiet moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth fighting for, something worth staying for. The fire crackled. Orin snored softly, and Kaela Frost, the wandering blade who'd trusted no one, closed her eyes and slept without nightmares for the first time in years. 3 weeks later, everything changed again. Kaela stood on the training grounds at dawn, facing 40 warriors who now looked at her with something approaching respect. They'd learned her methods, the dirty tactics, the precision strikes, the ruthless efficiency that kept you alive when honor got you killed. She'd pushed them hard, earning equal parts admiration and resentment, but the results spoke for themselves. Yesterday's sparring matches had shown dramatic improvement in their combat effectiveness. Garrett approached, his expression serious. Scouts just reported in. Thornridge is mobilizing, at least 200 warriors, maybe more. They're planning a full assault within the week. Kaela felt her stomach drop. 200? We have what, 70 combat-ready fighters? 63 after yesterday's casualties. Garrett's jaw tightened. Darien is calling in allied packs, but they won't arrive in time. We need a strategy that doesn't rely on matching their numbers. Then we don't match them. We outthink them. Kaela's mind raced, parsing through 15 years of survival tactics. Where's Darien? War Council, Longhouse. He wants you there. They walked together through the compound, Kaela's mind already working through possibilities. The war room was packed when they arrived. Darien at the head of the table, surrounded by his senior warriors and scouts. Maps were spread across the surface, showing the compound's layout and the surrounding territory. Darien looked up when she entered. Kaela, good. We need your tactical input. She moved to the table, studying the maps. The compound was well positioned, but ultimately indefensible against overwhelming numbers. The walls were stone, but they weren't high enough to stop determined shapeshifters. The gates could be breached with enough force. They'll come from multiple directions, one of the senior warriors was saying. Split our defenses, overwhelm us with numbers. So we give them what they expect, Kaela said, the plan forming as she spoke. We appear to defend the compound, but we don't actually put our forces here. Everyone turned to look at her. Explain, Darien commanded. Kaela pointed at the map. Thornridge wants Orin. Everything else is secondary, so we make them think he's here, in the compound, protected by our full force. We fight just hard enough to seem desperate, but not hard enough to actually stop them. You want us to let them breach the walls? Garrett sounded incredulous. I want them to think they've won. Let them pour into the compound, commit all their forces, and while they're searching for Orin, Kaela traced a path on the map. Our real fighting force hits them from behind, trap them inside their own victory. Silence filled the room. One of the senior warriors, a gray-haired woman named Kara, leaned forward. That's insane. You're talking about turning our own compound into a killing ground. I'm talking about using their arrogance against them. They expect us to defend these walls to the death. We don't. We evacuate non-combatants to the northern caves, leave a skeleton defense to make the fight look real, and ambush them when they're celebrating inside. And Orin? Darien's voice was dangerously quiet. Goes to the caves with the civilians, under heavy guard. If Thornridge somehow breaks through our ambush, he'll be miles away and safe. Darian studied the map, his expression unreadable. You're asking me to risk everything on a gamble. I'm asking you to fight smart instead of hard. Thornridge has numbers. We have knowledge of terrain and the element of surprise. That's worth more than 100 extra warriors. The room erupted in argument, some supporting her plan, others calling it suicide. Kaela stood back and let them fight it out, watching Darian's face for any sign of his decision. Finally, the Alpha King raised his hand for silence. Kaela's right. We can't win a straight fight, but we can make them think they're winning while we destroy them. He looked around the table. We'll do it her way. Kara, start evacuation procedures. Garrett, select our best fighters for the ambush force. I want everyone in position by tomorrow night. You're really trusting a human with our survival? Kara challenged. I'm trusting the person who kept my son alive through worse odds than this. Darian's eyes locked with Kayla's. Don't make me regret it. I won't. The next 2 days were chaos. Non-combatants, women, children, elderly, were moved to the northern caves under cover of darkness. Supplies were hidden. False defenses were erected to sell the illusion of a desperate last stand. And Kaela drilled the ambush force relentlessly, making sure every warrior knew their role. Orin watched it all from Kayla's side, the young wolf growing more somber as he sensed the tension. On the eve of battle, Daria summoned her to the longhouse. He won't go to the caves, the Alpha King said without preamble. I've tried reasoning with him, ordering him, everything. He refuses to leave unless you're going too. Kaela looked at Orin, who sat beside Darian's chair with stubborn determination in his eyes. I can't go. I'm leading the ambush force. I know. So either you convince him or... Darian trailed off, the unspoken alternative hanging between them. Kaela knelt in front of Orin. The young wolf was nearly the size of a full-grown timber wolf now, his white coat gleaming in the firelight. But when she looked in his eyes, she still saw the frightened cub she'd saved in that burned forest. Listen to me, she said quietly. Tomorrow is going to be dangerous. Your father needs you safe so he can fight without fear. Can you do that? Can you be brave enough to trust me even when we're apart? Orin whined, pressing his head against her chest. I know you're scared. I am too. But I promise, I swear on my life, I will come back for you. When this is over, when Thornridge is defeated, I will come to those caves and bring you home. She looked into his eyes. Do you trust me? The young wolf held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Relief flooded through her. Good. Your father will be with you, and Mira, you'll be safe. She stood, turning to Darian. Take care of him. Take care of my pack, Darian replied. Bring them home alive. That night, Kaela stood on the compound walls, looking out at the dark forest where Thornridge waited. Somewhere in those trees, 200 warriors were preparing to attack, confident in their numbers and their cause. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Garrett appeared beside her. The ambush force is ready. 60 fighters, all committed to your plan. They believe in it? They believe in you. That's enough. He paused. You've changed this pack, Kaela. Made us think differently about combat, about survival. Whatever happens tomorrow, that's worth something. Ask me again when we're not all dead. Garrett laughed, a short, sharp sound. Fair enough. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if frontier tactics work against shapeshifter warfare. But Kaela didn't sleep. She spent the night checking weapons, reviewing the plan, and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. When dawn came, so did Thornridge. They attacked at first light, exactly as predicted, a massive force splitting into 3 columns to assault the compound from multiple directions. On the walls, Kaela's skeleton defense fought back with practiced desperation, making every breach costly but never quite holding the line. She watched from her hidden position in the forest, concealed with the ambush force, as Thornridge warriors poured through the shattered gates. They were so focused on reaching the longhouse, on claiming their prize, that they never noticed they were being surrounded. Hold, Kaela whispered. Let them all get inside. Make them commit. 60 warriors waited, tense and ready, as the last of Thornridge's forces entered the compound. The walls were breached in 3 places now. Smoke rose from burning buildings, part of the deception, structures they'd evacuated and rigged to burn. Now, Kaela said. They struck from all sides simultaneously, catching Thornridge completely unprepared. The shapeshifters had expected defeated defenders. maybe a last desperate stand. What they got was a coordinated ambush by warriors who fought like demons. Kaela led the charge, her blade singing as she cut through the first line of enemies. The training she'd drilled into her fighters showed they didn't fight with honor, they fought to survive. Dirty tactics, precision strikes, targeting weak points without hesitation. The battle was brutal and fast. Thornridge tried to regroup, to mount a defense, but they were trapped inside walls they'd thought were their victory. The compound became a slaughterhouse. Kaela found their leader, a massive wolf with gray fur and calculating eyes, trying to organize a retreat. She hit him with every dirty trick she knew, using her size advantage to get under his attacks, her blades finding soft flesh and tendon. When he finally shifted to human form, blood pouring from a dozen wounds, she put her saber to his throat. "Surrender," she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield, "or I finish what we started." The Thornridge leader looked around, saw his warriors dead or captured, and his shoulders sagged. "We yield." The battle ended not with a final charge, but with an acknowledgement of defeat. Thornridge's surviving warriors were disarmed and secured while Kaela's fighters moved through the compound, assessing damage and casualties. When Garrett found her, his face was split by a wide grin despite the blood covering his armor. 8 dead, 15 wounded. The rest are whole. He looked at the dozens of Thornridge prisoners. "You did it. You actually did it." Kaela surveyed the compound, damaged but standing, defended by fighters who'd learned to think like her. "We all did it." Darian emerged from the caves later that afternoon, Orin at his side, to find his compound still standing and his enemy defeated. When he saw Kaela, covered in blood and ash but very much alive, something shifted in his expression. "You kept your promise," he said simply. "Always do." Orin bolted across the courtyard and nearly tackled Kaela, his joy palpable. She laughed, ignoring her protesting ribs, and held the young wolf close. That evening, the pack gathered in the longhouse, those who'd fought, and those who'd waited in fear. Darian stood before them, Kaela at his right hand, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "Today, we survived because we fought smart, because we trusted someone who saw what we couldn't." He looked at Kaela. "You've proven yourself 100 times over. You've earned your place here, not just as Orin's guardian, but as this pack's tactical leader. From this day forward, you stand as my second in matters of defense and warfare." Shocked silence. Then slowly, the warriors began to pound their fists against the tables, a gesture of respect and acceptance. Kaela felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back hard. This was more than she'd expected, more than she'd thought possible. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet," Darian said with a slight smile. "You've just inherited responsibility for keeping this pack alive. That's not a reward. It's a burden. I'll carry it anyway." As the celebration began, Kaela found herself pulled into conversations, warriors asking about tactics and training. The suspicion was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. She'd done it. She'd proven herself not just as a fighter, but as a leader worth following. And for the first time since that night in the burned forest, Kaela allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found where she belonged. The years passed like water through her fingers, fast, but leaving their mark. Kaela stood on the compound walls at dawn, watching the valley wake beneath a blanket of morning mist, and marveled at how different this view was from the one she'd seen that first day. The compound had grown, spreading beyond its original boundaries. New buildings, expanded training grounds, a second longhouse for the increased population, and at the center of it all, no longer a frightened cub, but a young wolf coming into his power, was Orin. "You're up early," a familiar voice said. Kaela turned to find Darian approaching, looking older than he had 4 years ago, but still formidable. Silver had claimed more of his hair, and new scars crossed his arms, but his eyes remained sharp. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much on my mind. The Riverford negotiations?" Among other things. Kaela looked back at the valley. The Riverford pack had requested an alliance, seeing Blackmore's strength and wanting to align themselves with it. It should have been simple, but politics never were. "They're asking for territorial concessions I'm not sure we should give." What does your instinct say? That they're testing us, seeing if we've gone soft with peace. Darian nodded. Trust that. Your instincts have kept us alive this long. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. You've changed this pack, Kaela. Not just tactically, but fundamentally. We're stronger, smarter, more adaptable than we've ever been. We, she repeated. Not me, us. Still deflecting credit after 4 years? Still uncomfortable with it after 4 years. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. Their relationship had evolved into something Kaela had never expected: partnership. Not quite friendship, too much history and hierarchy for that, but mutual respect, shared purpose, and the common ground of loving the same young wolf. He's ready, Darian said quietly. You know that, don't you? Kayla's chest tightened. She knew exactly what he meant. He's 17, still young. He's 17 and already the best fighter in the pack, already showing leadership qualities that rival my own at twice his age. Darian's voice held both pride and melancholy. Oren is ready to start taking on real responsibility, and we need to let him. I know. The words tasted like ash. Doesn't make it easier. No, but fighting what he's becoming won't help him grow. Darian paused. He's asked to lead the next patrol rotation. I want to say yes, but I wanted your input first. Kaela thought about the white wolf who'd become the center of her world. Oren had grown into his role as heir with a grace that still amazed her, balancing his father's expectations with his own fierce independence. He was smart, strategic, compassionate, but not weak. Everything a leader should be. And he'd done it while maintaining the bond they'd forged that night in the burned forest. Despite his growing responsibilities, despite the pack's demands, he still sought her out for training, for advice, for the simple comfort of her presence. Let him lead, Kaela said finally. But I go with the patrol. Not to interfere, just to observe. Fair enough? Darian turned to leave, then paused. Have you thought about what happens after? After what? After Oren takes over. After he becomes alpha. Darian's expression was unreadable. You've built your life around protecting him, training him, preparing him to lead. What do you do when he doesn't need that anymore? The question hit harder than expected. Kaela had spent 4 years so focused on the present that she'd never considered the future beyond it. What would she do when Oren was fully grown? When he had a pack of his own, responsibilities that didn't include her? I don't know, she admitted. Then maybe it's time to start thinking about it. Darian's voice gentled. You've given everything to this pack, to my son. Eventually, you're going to need to build something for yourself. He left before she could respond, leaving Kaela alone with thoughts she'd successfully avoided for years. The patrol departed 2 days later, 10 warriors with Oren at their head, his white coat gleaming in the morning sun. Kaela rode behind on one of the compound's horses, positioned to observe but not interfere. The young wolf had insisted she come. I need you there, he'd said the night before, shifted to his rarely used human form. At 17, Oren's human form was tall and lean, with his father's strong features and his mother's gentle eyes. Not to lead, just to be there. You don't need me to hold your hand anymore, Kaela had replied, though her heart ached at the thought. No, but I want you there anyway. Is that allowed? How could she say no to that? Now, watching him lead the patrol with confidence and strategic thinking that would have made Darian proud, Kaela felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also a bittersweet awareness that he was growing past the point where he needed her protection. The patrol was routine, checking territorial boundaries, investigating reports of unusual activity near the western border. Nothing dangerous, designed specifically to be Oren's first solo command, but the frontier had a way of making routine deadly. They were 3 hours out when the scout reported back. Movement ahead, large group, maybe 30 individuals, not shapeshifters, human. Oren called a halt, thinking. Kaela stayed back, forcing herself not to intervene even as her instincts screamed to take command. Identify them, Oren ordered. If they're just travelers, we let them pass. If they're armed and heading toward our territory, we intercept and question. Good call. Measured, strategic. The scout returned minutes later, her expression troubled. They're raiders, heavily armed, moving with purpose, and they've got prisoners. Looks like they hit a frontier settlement. Kaela's blood went cold. Raiders were common enough, but ones bold enough to operate this close to Blackmoor territory were either suicidal or didn't know whose land they were crossing. Oren's jaw tightened. How many prisoners? Maybe 10, mostly women and children. The patrol looked to Oren, waiting for orders. He could let the raiders pass, not Blackmoor's problem. He could send a messenger back for reinforcement, or he could act. We can't let them take those people, Oren said, his voice steady. Raiders on our border means they'll be back. Better to deal with them now. He looked at his warriors. Standard ambush pattern. We hit fast, secure the prisoners, and eliminate the threat. One of the warriors glanced at Kaela. Should we? I'm observing, Kaela cut in. This is Oren's command. Follow his orders. Pride and fear warred in her chest as she watched Oren deploy his forces. He positioned them perfectly, using terrain and surprise exactly as she'd taught him. When they struck, it was with the precision of a much more experienced commander. The raiders never had a chance. In minutes, it was over. The raiders were dead or fleeing, and the prisoners were secured and being tended to. Oren moved among them, offering water and reassurance in his human form, and Kaela saw the gratitude in their eyes. One of the rescued, a woman maybe 40, with a child clinging to her, looked up at Oren with tears streaming down her face. Thank you so much. We thought, you're safe now, Oren said gently. We'll escort you to the nearest settlement and make sure you're provided for. As the patrol prepared to move out with the refugees, Oren approached Kaela. In wolf form now, he looked at her with a question in his eyes. You did well, she said simply. Better than well. You led like you were born to it. His tail wagged once, and she saw the relief in his expression. He still needed her approval, even as he grew beyond needing her protection. When they returned to the compound that evening, Darian was waiting. He listened to the patrol's report, his expression growing more pleased with each detail. You handled it perfectly, he told Oren. Strategic thinking, compassionate leadership, decisive action. That's what this pack needs. Later, in the Longhouse, Darian made an announcement. Starting next month, Oren will be taking on more official duties. He'll sit in on council meetings, lead regular patrols, and begin learning the diplomatic and administrative aspects of leadership. The pack's response was overwhelmingly positive. They'd watched Oren grow up, seen him train, seen him prove himself. They were ready to accept him as more than the heir, as their future alpha. Kaela stood at the back of the room watching and felt something shift inside her. This was what she'd worked for, what all those training sessions and late nights and hard choices had been building toward. Oren was ready, which meant, as Darian had said, she needed to figure out what came next. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after Oren's successful patrol, a messenger arrived from the Northern Territories. The message was for Kaela specifically, carried in a sealed envelope with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. She opened it in her room, Oren watching curiously from where he'd sprawled across her floor in wolf form. He spent less time in her room now, had his own quarters, his own responsibilities, but still showed up most evenings like this was still his safe space. The letter was from an alliance of smaller packs in the north, territories that had heard of Blackmoor's strength and wanted to learn their methods. They were offering a position, tactical advisor and combat trainer for a coalition of 6 packs trying to defend themselves against aggressive expansion from a larger rival. It was everything she'd built at Blackmoor, but on a larger scale. More challenge, more responsibility, more opportunity to make a difference. It would also mean leaving. What is it? Oren had shifted to human form, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Kaela handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each line. They want you to leave, he said finally. They're offering me a position. That's not the same as, yes, it is. Oren looked up at her, and she saw the boy he'd been overlaid with the man he was becoming. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Kaela sat on her bed, feeling the weight of the decision. Part of me wants to. It's exactly the kind of work I'm good at. But it means leaving you, leaving this pack, leaving everything I've built here. Oren was quiet for a long moment. You stayed because of me, Because of the bond. Because you thought I needed you. You did need me. I did, but I don't anymore. Not the same way. He moved to sit beside her, his shoulder touching hers in a gesture of comfort. I'll always need you, Kaela. Your family. But I don't need you to protect me anymore. I can do that myself now. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like loss. What if I'm not ready to let that go? Kaela asked quietly. Then you stay, and you watch me grow and lead and make my own choices. And you build a life here that's about more than just me. Orin took her hand. Or you go. You take this opportunity and help other packs the way you helped ours. And you know I'll be okay because you taught me everything I need. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Kaela squeezed his hand, feeling tears she refused to let fall. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. Just don't make your choice based on what you think I need. Make it based on what you want. What did she want? 4 years ago, the answer would have been simple. Freedom, solitude, no attachments. Now everything was complicated by the bonds she'd formed, the purpose she'd found, the families she'd built. She spent a week wrestling with the decision, talking to Darian, to Mira, to the warriors she'd trained. Everyone had opinions, but no one could make the choice for her. In the end, it was Orin who gave her the answer. She found him on the training grounds one evening, working through advanced combat forms with a grace that made her heart ache with pride. He'd grown so much, not just in skill, but in confidence, in presence. He commanded respect now without demanding it. I'm staying, she said when he paused. Orin looked at her, surprised. Why? The Northern Alliance is a good opportunity. It is, but I realized something. Kaela crossed the training ground to stand beside him. I spent 15 years running from attachment because I thought it made me weak. Then you came along and proved me wrong. This pack, this family, it doesn't make me weak, it makes me stronger. And I'm not ready to leave that. You're sure? I am, but on one condition. She met his eyes. I need a role here that's mine. Not just training you, not just tactical advisor. Something that lets me contribute to this pack on my own terms. Orin smiled. I think I can help with that. He took her to Darian, and together they proposed a new position, Master of Frontier Relations. Kaela would be responsible for maintaining alliances with other packs, for training their forces, for traveling as Blackmore's representative to territories that needed their expertise. It was perfect, combining her skills with the freedom to move while maintaining her connection to the pack that had become her home. You'd be gone sometimes, Darian warned. Months at a time, potentially. But I'd come back. This would be my base, my family. The difference is, I'd be choosing to return instead of feeling trapped here. Darian considered, then nodded. The Pack Council will need to approve, but I support it. You've earned the right to define your own role. The Council approved unanimously, and so Kaela began her new life. Not as a wanderer with no ties, but as a representative of Blackmore, carrying their strength and wisdom to territories in need. Her first assignment was the Northern Alliance. She spent 3 months there, training their warriors, establishing defense protocols, and forging connections that would strengthen Blackmore's influence. It was hard work, but rewarding in ways she hadn't expected. And when she returned home, Orin was waiting at the compound gates, his white coat gleaming, his tail wagging with joy. Welcome back, he said, shifted to human form to embrace her. It's good to be back, Kaela replied, and meant it. The years continued to pass. Kaela took on more assignments, each one expanding Blackmore's reach and influence. She trained warriors in 6 different territories, brokered alliances, and established a network of packs that looked to Blackmore as a model of strength and stability. And through it all, she came home. Sometimes for a week, sometimes for months, but always returning to the compound that had become her anchor. She watched Orin grow into his role, taking on more responsibilities until, on his 21st birthday, Darian formally named him heir apparent and began transitioning leadership duties. The ceremony was held in the Longhouse, the entire pack assembled. Kaela stood beside Mira, watching Darian place the ceremonial collar, a silver chain marking leadership, around Orin's neck. You've proven yourself worthy in every way, Darian said, his voice thick with emotion. You're ready to lead this pack. And when my time comes, I know they'll be in capable hands. Orin bowed his head, accepting the weight of responsibility. When he lifted his eyes, he looked directly at Kaela. Everything they'd been through, the burned forest, the mercenaries, the battles, the training, the growth, all of it led to this moment. After the ceremony, Orin found her on the walls where she'd stood so many mornings, looking out at the valley. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saving me. For staying. For teaching me what it means to be strong without being cruel, to lead without demanding submission." Orin stood beside her, both of them watching the sun set over the territory. "I wouldn't be who I am without you. You'd have found your way. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to find it alone." They stood in comfortable silence, teacher and student, guardian and ward, family. "I have something to ask you," Orin said eventually. "When I become Alpha, not if, but when, I want you to be my second, my Luna." Kayla's breath caught. Luna, the Alpha's partner in leadership, the second in command. It was traditionally reserved for the Alpha's mate, but packs had occasionally broken tradition for exceptional circumstances. "Orin, I'm human. The pack would never accept—" "The pack already accepts you, has for years." Orin turned to face her fully. "You're not my mate, but you're my family. The person I trust most in this world. And if I'm going to lead this pack, I need someone beside me who will challenge me, who will tell me when I'm wrong, who will fight for what's right even when it's hard. That's you, Kaela. It's always been you." Tears finally escaped, running down her face. "You honor me more than you know." "Is that a yes?" Kaela looked out at the compound, at the life she'd built, the family she'd found, the purpose that had replaced the emptiness of wandering. "Yes," she said, "when you become Alpha, I'll stand beside you." Orin's smile could have lit the entire valley. 5 years later, when Darian finally stepped down after decades of leadership, the transition was seamless. Orin took the Alpha's collar with the pack's unanimous support, and Kaela stood at his right hand as Luna, the first human to ever hold the position in Blackmoor history. There were challenges, of course. Some traditionalists who questioned a human in leadership, rival packs who saw it as weakness. But Orin and Kaela faced them together, proving again and again that their partnership was Blackmoor's greatest strength. Under their leadership, the pack flourished, the territory expanded, alliances multiplied, and the methods Kaela had introduced, tactical thinking, adaptive combat, willingness to change, became the foundation of Blackmoor's continued dominance. But it was the quiet moments that Kaela treasured most. Evenings when she and Orin would walk the compound walls, discussing strategy and pack politics, and everything that came with leadership. Training sessions where she still pushed him to be better, faster, smarter. The rare peaceful days when they could simply sit together and remember a burned forest, and a frightened cub, and the woman who'd chosen to save him. "Do you regret it?" Orin asked her once, years into their partnership. "Staying? Giving up the freedom of the frontier?" Kaela thought about the question seriously, looking back at all she'd sacrificed and all she'd gained. "No," she said finally. "I thought freedom meant being alone, owing nothing to anyone. But real freedom, the kind that matters, is choosing who you stand with, who you fight for, who you build a life beside." She looked at Orin, who'd grown from a terrified cub into a powerful Alpha, from a child who needed protection into a leader who protected others. "I chose to stand with you," she continued. "I chose this pack, this family, this purpose. And that choice gave me something I never had when I was alone. It gave me a reason to be more than just a survivor." Orin rested his head against her shoulder, a gesture from childhood that he'd never outgrown. "I'm glad you chose us." "So am I." The frontier still existed beyond their borders, brutal, unforgiving, taking no prisoners. But within Blackmoor's territory, Kaela had helped create something different, a place where strength didn't mean isolation, where caring about something didn't make you weak, where a human woman and a shapeshifter wolf could build a partnership that changed an entire kingdom. Years turned into decades. Kayla's hair slowly grayed, her scars multiplied, but she remained as fierce and capable as ever. She trained new generations of warriors, maintained alliances, and stood beside Orin through every challenge that came their way. And when travelers passed through Blackmoor territory, they carried stories back to the frontier. Stories of a pack led by a white wolf and his human Luna. Of a kingdom that thrived because it adapted, that survived because it valued wisdom over tradition, that flourished because it understood that true strength came from choosing who you stood with. On quiet nights, when Kaela stood on the walls and looked out at the valleys she'd helped defend for so many years, she sometimes thought about the woman she'd been, the wandering blade who trusted no one and believed attachment was death. That woman was gone, transformed by a choice made in a burned forest to protect something that couldn't protect itself. In saving a cub, she'd unknowingly saved an empire. But more importantly, she'd saved herself. She'd learned that isolation wasn't strength, it was just loneliness wearing armor. That caring about something didn't make you vulnerable. It gave you something worth fighting for. That family wasn't a weakness to avoid. It was the only thing that made survival meaningful. The frontier had taught her to be hard, to trust no one, to never attach. But Oren and Blackmoor had taught her something more important, that the strongest people weren't the ones who stood alone. They were the ones who chose who they stood with. And in the end, that made all the difference. Kaela Frost, the wandering blade who became a queen, stood on her walls and watched the sun rise over the kingdom she'd helped build. And she smiled, because she was finally, truly home. The celebration that night felt premature to Kaela. Warriors filled the longhouse, drinking and boasting about the victory over Thornridge. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. She stood near the fire, watching Darian accept congratulations from his senior warriors, while Oren sat at his feet, the young wolf's eyes never leaving his father's face. "You're not celebrating," Mira observed, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of mead. "I'm thinking." Kaela accepted the cup but didn't drink. Thornridge surrendered too easily. Their leader gave up the moment we had him cornered, but he didn't seem defeated. He seemed satisfied. Maybe he was just smart enough to know when he'd lost. Maybe. Kayla's eyes tracked the Thornridge leader where he sat under guard near the far wall. Or maybe getting captured was part of the plan. Mira followed her gaze. "You think he wanted to get inside the compound?" "I think we need to find out what he's really after." Kaela set down her untouched mead. Because if Oren was the prize, and we've proven he's untouchable, then why did Thornridge bring 200 warriors for an attack they had to know would fail? Before Mira could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Guards were shouting, and Kayla's hand went to her blade as she pushed through the crowd. A scout stumbled in, bleeding from a wound in her leg, her face pale with shock. "Alpha?" "The northern perimeter." "Is that where you posted the refugees from the attack?" Kaela interrupted, ice flooding her veins. The scout's eyes widened. "Yes. How did you—" Kaela was already running, Darian's shout following her out the door. She burst into the night air, Oren suddenly at her side in wolf form, and together they sprinted toward the northern caves where the non-combatants had been sheltered. The scent hit her first, smoke, then blood. They found the cave entrance breached, guards dead, and the refugees scattered in terror. But it wasn't random violence. This was surgical, targeted. "They took the children," one of the surviving guards gasped, clutching a stomach wound. "The Thornridge prisoners we rescued. They weren't prisoners at all. They waited until everyone was relaxed, then struck. Took all the pack children and ran north." Kayla's world tilted. The entire battle, the surrender, all of it had been a diversion. Thornridge hadn't come for Oren. They'd come to kidnap the pack's future, every child under 10, including the Alpha's bloodline through various cousins and relatives. Oren shifted to human form beside her, his face stricken. "How many?" 17 children. The youngest is 3. The guard coughed blood. They had maybe a 10-minute head start. Darian arrived with 20 warriors, his expression murderous. How did they get past the defenses? "Because we put all our focus on the compound," Kaela said, the realization bitter in her mouth. "We moved the non-combatants to keep them safe from the battle, then left them with minimal guards because all our fighters were here. Thornridge knew we'd do that. They counted on it. Then we go after them," Darian snarled. "Full force. We hunt them down and they'll kill the children the moment they see us coming," Kaela interrupted. "This was planned too carefully. They'll have contingencies, escape routes, hostage protocols. If we charge in with an army, Those kids die. Then what do you suggest? Darian's voice was deadly calm. We let them take our children? No, we get them back. Kaela's mind raced, calculating distances and possibilities. But not with an army, with a small team, fast, quiet, surgical. You're talking about a stealth extraction against an enemy that's expecting pursuit. I'm talking about giving them what they're not expecting, a single fighter who's willing to trade herself for the children. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Oren grabbed her arm. No, absolutely not. You're not sacrificing yourself. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm creating an opportunity. Kaela pulled free, facing Darian. They wanted leverage over Blackmore. They failed to get Oren, so they took the children. But what they really want is to break your power, to prove you can't protect your own. So we give them a better prize, the human who destroyed their army, the tactical mind behind your defense. Me. And then what? Darian demanded. You think they'll just release the children for you? No. But I think they'll bring me to wherever they're holding them. And once I'm inside, I can create enough chaos for a rescue team to extract the kids while everyone's focused on me. It's suicide. It's the only play we have. Kaela looked around at the assembled warriors. Unless someone has a better idea for finding 17 kidnapped children in the Northern Territories before Thornridge disappears with them completely. Silence. Because she was right, and they all knew it. Darian's jaw worked. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. I can't order you to do this. You're not ordering. I'm volunteering. Kaela turned to Oren, who was shaking his head violently. I know you don't want this. But those children, they're your pack. Your responsibility. What would you do to save them? Anything, Oren said immediately. But not this. Not you. Why not? Because the bond makes me valuable? Because you need me? Kaela's voice gentled. Oren, I taught you to survive without me. Now trust that you can. This isn't about survival. This is about... Oren's voice cracked. You can't ask me to just let you go. I'm not asking. I'm telling you, this is what I choose. Kaela cupped his face in her hands. You've grown into someone incredible. Someone strong enough to lead without me standing beside you. And those children deserve the chance to grow up and become incredible too. That's worth the risk. Tears streamed down Oren's face. The first time she'd seen him cry since he was a cub. What if you don't come back? Then you remember everything I taught you. You lead this pack the way we planned, and you don't let my choice be meaningless by falling apart. She pressed her forehead to his. Can you do that? I don't want to. I know. But can you? A long, shaking breath. Then, yes. Kaela released him and turned to Darian. I'll need a small team, your best trackers and fighters, people who can move fast and hit hard when the moment comes. Garrett, Darian said immediately. Kara, Mira if she's willing, 3 others of your choosing. Good. We leave in 10 minutes. And Darian? Kaela met his eyes. When this is over, those children better have a home to come back to. Don't let Thornridge's gambit work even if I fail. Don't let them break this pack. Bring them home, Darian replied. That's an order. Yes, Alpha. The team assembled quickly. 6 warriors plus Kaela, all mounted on the fastest horses. They rode north at a punishing pace, following the trail Thornridge had deliberately left obvious. They wanted to be followed, wanted the confrontation. Kaela would give it to them. 3 hours later, they found the Thornridge camp in a narrow valley surrounded by steep cliffs. Defensive position, limited approaches, guards posted at every entrance. And in the center, visible even from a distance, were the children, caged, terrified, but alive. They're using them as bait, Garrett muttered, hoping we'll charge in and give them an excuse to kill hostages. They won't get the chance. Kaela dismounted, checking her weapons. I'm going to walk in, make the trade. When they're focused on me, you move on the cages, fast and quiet. Get those kids out and run. Don't wait for me. And if they kill you the moment you surrender? Mira asked. Then you'll have a clear shot at their leadership while they're distracted. Kaela's smile was cold. Either way, those children go home tonight. She walked down into the valley alone, her hands raised, blades sheathed. Thornridge warriors emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn, eyes wary. I want to speak to your leader, Kaela called out. I'm here to make a deal. The Thornridge leader, the same man she'd defeated in the compound, stepped forward. He was still wounded, bandages visible beneath his armor, but his expression was triumphant. Kaela Frost, the human who thinks she's a wolf. He circled her slowly. I knew you'd come. Knew you couldn't resist trying to save them. Let the children go. Take me instead. Why would I do that? I have both now. Because I'm worth more. I'm the one who destroyed your assault, who killed your warriors, who proved that a human could outthink your entire pack. Kaela kept her voice level. You want to break Blackmore? Taking their children makes you monsters. But breaking their tactical leader? That makes you brilliant. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the temptation. Pride versus strategy. And what makes you think we won't just kill you and keep the children anyway? He asked. Because your goal isn't random cruelty, it's power. And having me, alive, imprisoned, broken, sends a stronger message than dead children. It proves you can defeat Blackmore's best without descending to mindless violence. You're very clever. It's almost a shame to destroy you. Then don't destroy me. Use me. Parade me as your captive. Prove that even the great Kaela Frost can be defeated. That's worth more than killing frightened children. The Thornridge leader considered, then smiled slowly. You make a compelling argument. Very well. The children for you. My warriors will escort them to the border and release them there. I want to see them leave first. Of course. I wouldn't want you to think I'm dishonorable. He gestured, and warriors moved toward the cages. Kaela watched, her heart pounding as the children were brought out, 17 small faces, tear-stained and terrified. The youngest was being carried by an older girl, maybe 9, who held him with fierce protection. As the children were led past her, Kaela met the older girl's eyes. Be brave, she whispered. Run fast and don't look back. The girl nodded once, then they were past, being herded toward the valley's northern exit. Kaela waited, counting seconds, giving them distance. Somewhere in the darkness, Garrett and the others would be positioning themselves, ready to intercept and protect the children once they were clear of the camp. Satisfied? The Thornridge leader asked. Almost. Kaela drew her blades with lightning speed, throwing one at the guard nearest the children and the other at the leader's face. Then she ran straight into the center of the camp, shouting at the top of her lungs. Chaos erupted. Thornridge warriors scrambled to respond, confused about whether to chase the escaping children or subdue Kaela. In the confusion, Garrett's team struck from the shadows, cutting down guards and covering the children's escape. Kaela fought like a demon possessed, her remaining weapons flashing in the firelight. She wasn't trying to win, just to create enough mayhem that the rescue team could extract the hostages. A club caught her across the back, driving her to her knees. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back. She bucked and fought, but there were too many. The Thornridge leader stood over her, blood streaming from where her thrown knife had grazed his cheek. You lied. I improvised. There's a difference, Kaela grinned through split lips. And I kept my word. I traded myself for the children. The fact that I made it difficult is just a bonus. You cost me 15 more warriors. Should have taken the deal when I offered it peacefully. His fist caught her across the jaw, and the world went dark. She woke to pain and the smell of damp stone. Kaela blinked, trying to focus, and realized she was chained to a wall in what looked like a cave. Her weapons were gone, her armor stripped, and her body was a map of bruises and cuts. But the children were safe. She'd seen them escape. That was what mattered. Footsteps approached. The Thornridge leader entered, carrying a torch. You're awake. Good. I was worried I'd hit you too hard. He set the torch in a sconce. Do you know where you are? Your secret base where you torture prisoners and feel powerful? Close. This is the Thornridge Ancestral Cave, where we've held councils for 3 generations. He crouched beside her. I'm going to break you here, slowly. And when you're broken, I'm going to send pieces of you back to Darian Blackmore until he understands that his pack is finished. You're going to be disappointed. I don't break easily. Everyone breaks eventually. It's just a question of finding the right leverage. He stood. And I think I know what yours is. That white wolf, Orin. He cares about you, loves you even. So we're going to send him your fingers first, then your toes. Then we'll get creative. Kaela felt ice flood her veins, but she kept her expression neutral. By the time you get around to mailing body parts, Blackmore will have found this place and killed everyone in it. Let them try. This cave is hidden, protected by magic older than the packs themselves. No one finds it unless we want them to. After he left, Kaela tested her chains. Solid. The manacles were iron, designed to hold shapeshifters, which meant they'd easily hold a human. The cave was damp, cold, and absolutely isolated. She'd been in worse situations. Barely. But she had to admit this one was challenging. Hours passed, maybe days. It was impossible to tell in the darkness. Guards brought water, but no food. The cold seeped into her bones. And slowly, inevitably, doubt began to creep in. What if the children hadn't escaped? What if Garrett's team had been overwhelmed? What if she'd sacrificed herself for nothing? What if Oren thought she'd abandoned him? The questions circled like vultures, and Kaela fought them with the same determination she'd fought every battle. She'd made her choice, stood by her principles, protected what mattered. Whatever came next, she'd face it like she'd faced everything else, with steel in her spine and ice in her veins. On what she guessed was the third day, everything changed. The howl started distant and grew closer. Not one wolf, but many, a chorus that made the cave walls tremble. Kaela's heart leapt. That was a pack call, a war song. Blackmore had found her. The sounds of battle filtered down, snarls, screams, the clash of weapons. Then footsteps, running fast, and the cave door burst open. Oren stood there in human form, his eyes wild, his clothes torn and bloody. Behind him were Garrett, Mira, and what looked like half the Blackmore fighting force. "I told you to leave me," Kaela said, her voice rough from disuse, "and I ignored you." Oren crossed to her in 3 strides, his hand shaking as he worked at her chains. "Did you really think I'd just let you rot here? I thought you'd be smart enough to know when something was too dangerous." "I am smart. Smart enough to track you here, smart enough to bring overwhelming force, and smart enough to know that some things are worth any risk." The chains fell away, and Oren caught her as she collapsed forward. "Your family, Kaela. I don't leave family behind." Garrett appeared with her weapons and armor. "We need to move. Thornridge is regrouping, and they've got reinforcements coming." "The children?" Kaela asked as Oren helped her stand. "Safe. Home in the compound. Alt 17. Not a scratch on them thanks to you." Garrett's expression was grim. "But Thornridge is calling in every allied pack they have. This isn't over." They fought their way out of the cave, Kaela moving on pure adrenaline despite her injuries. The battle outside was brutal, Blackmore forces clashing with Thornridge defenders in a desperate struggle for control. Kaela found the Thornridge leader near the center, directing his warriors with practiced efficiency. When he saw her, his expression twisted with rage. "You should have stayed chained," he snarled, shifting to wolf form. "I don't stay anywhere I don't choose to be." They clashed, and despite her weakened state, Kaela fought with the fury of someone who'd been pushed too far. She was done with Thornridge, done with their schemes and their cruelty and their willingness to use children as weapons. The fight was vicious and fast. He had size and strength. She had rage and precision. When he lunged for her throat, she sidestepped and drove her blade up through his ribs, finding his heart. He shifted back to human form as he died, his eyes wide with shock. "How?" "Because I fight for something bigger than power," Kaela said quietly. "And that makes all the difference." As he fell, the remaining Thornridge warriors saw their leader die, and their resolve broke. Some ran. Others surrendered. Within minutes, the battle was over. Kaela stood in the carnage, bleeding and exhausted, and felt Oren's arm around her shoulders. "Let's go home," he said gently. The journey back to the compound took 2 days. Kaela was in and out of consciousness, her body finally giving in to the accumulated damage. When she woke, she was in the infirmary with Sarah hovering over her. "Welcome back," the healer said with a tired smile. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. We weren't sure you'd make it." "The children?" Kaela rasped. "All safe, all home, thanks to you." Sarah helped her sit up slowly. "You're a hero, you know. The pack is calling you the savior of the young." Bit dramatic, but accurate. Kayla's head spun, but she forced herself to focus. "I need to see Darian. He's been here every day. So has Oren. They're both outside waiting." When Darian and Oren entered, Kaela was struck by how similar their expressions were. Relief mixed with exasperation, mixed with something that looked like pride. "You disobeyed a direct order," Darian said, "but there was no heat in it. I told you to bring the children home, not to get yourself captured and tortured." "Technically, I brought the children home. The capture was just a complication. A complication that nearly got you killed." "But didn't." Kaela met his eyes. "The children are safe, Thornridge is broken, and Blackmore's position is stronger than ever. I'd call that a successful mission." Darian shook his head, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "You're impossible." "I'm effective. There's a difference." He moved closer, his expression growing serious. "What you did, sacrificing yourself for pack children who aren't even your blood, that's the kind of leadership this pack needs. The kind I need." He paused. "When I announced your position as Master of Frontier Relations, some warriors questioned it, said a human couldn't truly understand pack loyalty. You've proven them wrong in the most definitive way possible. I just did what needed doing." "No. You did what few would have the courage to do. You put pack before self. That's the highest honor in shapeshifter culture." Darian pulled something from his pocket, a silver chain with a wolf's head pendant. "This belonged to my mate. She wore it as Luna, as my second in leadership. She died protecting Oren, and I swore I'd only give it to someone who embodied the same selfless courage." He held it out to Kaela. "I want you to have it, not as Oren's guardian, but as my Luna, my equal partner in leading this pack." The room went silent. Kaela stared at the pendant, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Luna wasn't just a title. It was family. It was legacy. It was becoming part of the pack's foundation. "Darian, I'm not Oren's mother. I'm not your mate. You're the person who's proven time and again that you'd die for this pack. You're the strategist who's kept us alive and thriving. You're the warrior who inspires others to be better than they thought possible." Darian's voice was steady. "Luna isn't about blood or romance. It's about who stands beside the Alpha when everything falls apart. That's you, Kaela. It's been you for years. I'm just making it official." Kaela looked at Oren, who was watching with tears streaming down his face. "This is what you want?" "It's what I've wanted since you agreed to stay," Oren said. "You're my family. You should be recognized as such." Slowly, Kaela reached out and took the pendant. The silver was warm, as if it had been waiting for her. "I don't know how to be Luna." "You'll figure it out. You always do." Darian's smile was genuine. "Besides, you've already been doing the job. Now you just get the title and the formal authority." "And the formal responsibility," Kaela countered. "That too." She fastened the chain around her neck, feeling the weight of the pendant settle against her chest. It felt right, like something had clicked into place that she hadn't known was missing. "Okay," she said quietly, "I'll be your Luna. But we do it my way. No tradition for tradition's sake, no rules that don't serve the pack's best interest." "I wouldn't expect anything less." The formal ceremony took place a week later, when Kaela had recovered enough to stand without swaying. The entire pack assembled in the valley, hundreds of wolves in both human and shifted forms, all watching as Darian announced the change in leadership structure. "For years, Kaela Frost has served this pack with distinction," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "She's trained our warriors, defended our territory, and proven that loyalty and courage aren't limited by species. Today I name her Luna of Blackmore, my partner in leadership, my equal in authority, and my sister in purpose." The response was overwhelming. Warriors who doubted her, who challenged her, who'd questioned whether a human belonged in pack leadership, they all raised their voices in acceptance. Because she'd earned it, proven it, bled for it. Kaela stood beside Darian, Oren on her other side, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This wasn't just a title or a position. This was belonging. True, complete belonging in a way she'd never experienced. The Wanderer had finally found home. The years that followed were marked by growth and change. Under Kaela and Darian's joint leadership, Blackmore expanded its influence, forged new alliances, and became known throughout the territories as a pack that valued merit over tradition, strategy over brute force, and innovation over stagnation. Kaela continued her work with other packs, But now she traveled as Luna, with the full authority and respect that came with the title. She trained warriors in 6 territories, established defense protocols that saved countless lives, and built a network of alliances that made Blackmoor the most influential pack in the frontier. And through it all, she watched Orin grow into the leader he was meant to be. At 21, he was formally named heir apparent, taking on increasing responsibilities while Darien began the slow process of transitioning power. The pack accepted him completely, seeing in him the perfect blend of his father's strength and Kaela's strategic mind. "You taught me everything," Orin told her one evening as they walked the compound walls together. "How to fight, how to think, how to lead. But more than that, you taught me that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help and who to trust." "You figured that out on your own," Kaela replied. "I just created the conditions for you to learn it." "Still, without you..." He trailed off, looking out at the territory he would someday rule. "I don't think I'd be ready for this." "You're more ready than you know. And when the time comes, you'll be a better alpha than your father or I could ever be." "You really believe that?" "I do. Because you've got the best of both of us, plus something uniquely yours. Compassion without weakness, confidence without arrogance. That's rare, Orin. Don't underestimate it." The night Darien officially stepped down was emotional for everyone. After 25 years as Alpha, he passed the leadership to Orin in a ceremony that honored both tradition and the new direction the pack was taking. Kaela stood beside Orin as he accepted the Alpha's collar, and when he turned to her with tears in his eyes, she saw not the frightened cub she'd saved, but the powerful leader he'd become. "I need you to stay," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "As Luna. As my partner in this, I can't do it without you." "You can," Kaela replied, "but you don't have to. I'll stay as long as you need me." "Then I guess you're stuck here forever, because I'll always need you." She smiled, feeling tears prick her own eyes. "I can live with that." And she did. For years, Kaela served as Luna beside Alpha Orin, helping him navigate the challenges of leadership with the same strategic mind and fierce loyalty she'd always shown. They expanded the pack's territory, strengthened alliances, and created a legacy of innovation and adaptation that would influence shapeshifter culture for generations. There were challenges, of course. Rival packs who tested their authority. Internal disputes that required careful mediation. The constant balancing act of honoring tradition while embracing change. But through it all, Kaela and Orin stood together. The human Luna and the white wolf Alpha, proving that strength came in many forms and that family was defined by choice, not blood. On her 60th birthday, Kaela stood on the compound walls at dawn, watching the sun paint the valley in shades of gold. Her hair was silver now, her face lined with age and scars, but her eyes remained sharp and her hands steady. Orin joined her, gray touching his own muzzle in wolf form. He'd aged well, grown into his power with grace and wisdom. Beside him walked his own son, a young white wolf who looked at Kaela with the same trust and devotion Orin had shown as a cub. "He wants you to train him," Orin said, shifted to human form. "Says he wants to learn from the best." Kaela looked at the young wolf, the next generation, the future of everything they'd built, and felt her heart swell. "I'd be honored," she said. As the young wolf bounded off to explore, Orin stood beside her in comfortable silence. They'd been together for over 30 years now, partners in leadership and family in every way that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying, giving up your freedom?" Kaela thought about the question, looking back at the life she'd built. The warriors she'd trained, the alliances she'd forged, the pack she'd helped lead. The young wolf she'd raised who'd become one of the greatest alphas in Blackmoor history. "No," she said finally, "because I didn't give up my freedom. I chose what to do with it. And I chose this, chose you, chose this pack, chose to build something that would outlast me." She looked at Orin, seeing the man he'd become overlaid with the memory of the cub he'd been. "You know what the greatest freedom is? It's not being able to walk away from everything. It's being able to choose what you'll stand for, what you'll fight to protect, what you'll build your life around." Kaela rested her hand on the wall, feeling the solid stone beneath her palm, stone she'd helped defend, territory she'd helped expand, home she'd helped create. "I chose to stand for this pack. For you. For the idea that family is made, not born. And that choice, that commitment, gave me more freedom than I ever had wandering alone. Oren leaned against her shoulder, the gesture as natural now as it had been when he was young. I'm glad you chose us. So am I. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, Luna and Alpha, teacher and student, family forged in blood and choice and unwavering loyalty. Around them, the compound came alive, children laughing, warriors training, families beginning their day. This was Blackmoor. This was home. And standing on those walls, Kaela Frost, the wandering blade, who became a queen, the human who earned the title of Luna, the warrior who proved that strength meant choosing who you stand with, smiled. Because she'd learned the truth the frontier had tried to hide. That attachment wasn't death. It was life. It was purpose. It was everything that made survival worthwhile. She'd saved a wolf cub in a burned forest, thinking she was just preventing one small death. Instead, she'd saved herself, found family, built a legacy, and proven that the strongest bonds aren't the ones forced by blood or circumstance, but the ones chosen freely and defended fiercely. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the battles won or the enemies defeated, but the choice to stand beside someone and say, this is my pack, this is my family, this is worth fighting for. Kaela had made that choice, and it had changed everything. As the morning sun bathed the valley in golden light, the Luna of Blackmoor stood watch over the kingdom she'd helped build, surrounded by the family she'd chosen, living the life she'd earned. And in her heart, where the frozen walls had once kept everything out, there was only warmth, only home, only love. The wanderer's journey was complete. The lone wolf had finally found her pack, and she would stand with them, fierce and loyal and unbreakable until her last breath. Because that was what Luna meant. That was what family meant. That was what choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, and purpose over survival had given her. Everything.